Mass Effect was a game I totally missed out on upon its release, but finally got to playing it only a year ago, shortly after the Legendary Edition came out. After playing the entire trilogy, I fell in love. This brings me to this video, playing the game a year later to see if my feelings about this game were right. From what I remember though, I love Mass Effect. The first game was my least favorite out of the three, with 2 being my favorite and 3 being the most emotional. Will going back to the first game change my mind? Will it stay the same? All of those questions will be answered here. It is also important to note that in this video, I will spoil everything in the game. If you haven't ever played Mass Effect before, I recommend you play it and then come back to this analysis, and trust me, this series is something you want to play for yourself before anything else. After you're done, feel free to come back to this video, but with that being said, here are the things I'll go over. The main story, obviously, the characters within the party and analyzing their personalities as well as some of their quests, a handful of side quests, they're way too much to cover all of them, so I'm not going to do all of them, and finally, analyzing, critiquing gameplay systems such as combat controls, skills, dialogue, and so forth. So with the intro out of the way, be sure to like the video. With a channel as small as mine, this helps out a lot. Feel free to subscribe and click that bell icon. Anyways, let's get on with the video. To start things off, we are greeted with the character creation screen. Here is when you can, of course, morph your character into someone who looks like you, or mess around and create a gremlin. The important thing is the backgrounds you could choose for Shepard. To start, you have your pre-service history with choices of either Spacer, Colonist, or Earthborn. These choices only affect dialogue in all honesty, and even then, it is only a few instances. Spacer is pretty much where you grew up in a family that spent their time with the Alliance, and you followed in their footsteps. Colonist is where you grew up on a different planet, but that planet was invaded and they slaughtered your family. You survived and got picked up by an Alliance patrol, which caused you to enlist. And finally, Earthborn. Of course, you grew up on Earth, but were essentially homeless. You grew up around gangs, but to escape that life, you enlisted at 18. These choices are interesting, don't get me wrong, but the Spacer one is by far the most boring out of the two. It's a goody two-shoes choice for Shepard, which just doesn't make sense for my character. I already chose Earthborn when I did my first playthrough, so that means this time around, I'm going to choose Colonist. Next, you must choose your psychological profile. This is pretty much the background of your military career, and again, it will most likely impact dialogue on a small scale. The choices are Sole Survivor, War Hero, and Ruthless. Sole Survivor is self-explanatory. Shepard was the only one standing after a mission which he had to endure torture. War Hero is once again self-explanatory. You defeated enemies against impossible odds in order to save your own men. Lastly, for the people that want a Renegade playthrough, Ruthless, this is for the people that want to play a Shepard who doesn't give a fuck and will do anything to complete the mission. I don't want to play Renegade Shepard and I wanted something I haven't done before. War Hero is just that. This next part is the most interesting out of the 3. You get to choose your military specialization. This affects combat tremendously. From the number of guns you can use to the abilities you have Soldier, which is probably the more first time playing class that only specializes in guns and all types of armor. I chose this my first time, but if you are someone that wants something interesting in this game, pick something else besides that. Engineers, I would say, is more of a support role than anything else. Use this class if you plan on using your party more often. They can decrypt things, disrupt weapons, heal their squad, and so forth. The one thing that turned me off from this class is that you can only use a pistol, so no thank you. Adept is your biotic class. This is for the people that love using abilities rather than weapons. I will say this is a difficult class to use if you have never played the game before, considering that you can only wear light armor and only use a limited number of weapons. Infiltrator is your sniper class that can decrypt as well as use medium armor, and I'm not someone that snipes. I like to somewhat tank and have heavy damage output. Sentinel is a class that combines engineer with adept. The cons are that you can really only do well in traditional combat and you get no advanced weapon training, which sucks. Vanguard, which is what I chose, is a combination of soldier and adept. In Skyrim terms, kind of like a battle mage. I have biotic abilities as well as the ability to wield more than one weapon class. They also specialize in CQC, which is what I wanted. Also, I had the ability to choose a bonus talent, so I chose to do assault rifles because why not? I love the different playstyles you can achieve with this character creation system. It makes it so you have strengths and weaknesses in combat. If you are an infiltrator, it is best that you don't get close and personal with enemies. If you're a soldier, you're a jack of all trades but master of none, not including biotic abilities. It felt balanced and fair when it comes to which playstyle you want. There is no meta here. It is what you want Shepard to be and that's it. And yes, that was a jab at Destiny. And later in the game, you're introduced to the leveling system. This is heavily dictated on what type of soldier you chose in the creation menu, and some abilities are only unlocked when you level another ability far enough. For me, at least regarding what I prioritized, I went for Charm, Intimidate, Assault Rifles, and Vanguard. Everything else, in my opinion, was something nice to have but wasn't essential. When it comes to RPGs, I always go for abilities that have to do with dialogue because I want all options available. I want to be able to pass speech checks, I want to barter for less prices, and so forth. Though in this game, Charm mostly has to do with lowering prices at shops. For speech checks, this is heavily reliant upon the Paragon and Renegade routes, so let's go deep into that. In the first Mass Effect, I think this system was handled the best, but I go back and forth with this statement, so just bear with me. Mostly because it was harder to achieve a high Paragon or Renegade count, and the speech checks that go along with it are more challenging to unlock as well. These speech checks can dictate whether a character dies, what outcome of a mission you'll get, what companions think of you, and so forth. I also think your Paragon or Renegade count is transferred to other games in the series, but I'm not sure. Before we analyze anything in depth, what exactly is Paragon or Renegade? Paragon is essentially your good guy points and Renegade is your bad guy points. Depending on what dialogue options you pick, what mission outcome you get, and so forth, will allocate those points to Paragon or Renegade. What I like about this system the best is you can for sure be a middle of the road Shepard and still be able to choose Paragon or Renegade dialogue options. Say some character pisses you off or is annoying. You can be a Renegade character, but overall your Shepard can still be considered a good guy. They struck a nice balance with this. Your Paragon will not decrease if your Renegade increases. This is great considering some dialogue options will be totally different to what Shepard says. For example, if you chose a sarcastic dialogue option with no intention to be a complete dick, Shepard will sometimes say something that makes him seem like a dick regardless and will grant you Renegade points. But because the system is balanced enough, this won't decrease your Paragon. It will only add to Renegade. I think the opposite happens when you play SWTOR, which irritated the fuck out of me. Regardless, back to the leveling system. This also stems to your party members as well. I'm gonna admit this up front. I made the decision to auto level my party rather than doing it manually, which I shouldn't have done, and I realized this by the end of the game. The shitty part is the game never fully levels an ability for your party. It always evenly distributes. This made it so some characters couldn't decrypt storage lockers, they died more than they should have, and their abilities weren't as good as they could have been. So moral of the story, please don't disown me because I used auto level. I understand I should have done it manually. Regardless, the leveling for your party members is the same as if you were leveling Shepard. Choose the abilities you want your characters to be efficient in and max it out. But let's get back to the story. The game starts out with characters named Ambassador Udina and Captain Anderson recounting Shepard's backstory in which you, the player, chose. These characters allude to Shepard being important in regard to a certain thing that isn't revealed to us just yet. The funniest shit is just the fact that Shepard is looking out the window like he's overseeing Gotham. Then after, we are given a brief description of the world we are about to be a part of. This game takes place in the year 2148. Humans discovered ancient technology on Mars when they were exploring. With this ancient tech, humans are now able to harness faster than light travel. This caused humans to also discover these relays that allow travel to the furthest stars in the galaxy, which is the reason why this game is called Mass Effect, since this discovery is called the Mass Effect. I will say I usually don't like reading to set up world building within media besides Star Wars. I just like it when media shows instead of tells, but here I can understand why it is needed. If you do it within gameplay, it would be considered boring exposition. If you do it at the beginning with words, it is a cinematic and good introduction. In other words, I like the intro and I don't mind that I have to read. For some, this may seem like a weird thing to bring up, and I understand, but hopefully there is someone out there who doesn't like to read text in games just like me. Regardless, this is also where you see a Mass Effect relay for the first time. It is a cool set piece for the game and introduces the basis of what this game is about. After our ship gets launched through this relay, it is when the game really starts. Here is when you get to meet some characters: Joker, Kaiden, and Nihilus. Joker and Kaiden will be important characters. Nihilus, well, we will talk about that in a bit. Essentially, Joker thinks that the mission we're going on isn't just a land and takeoff. He thinks that there is more to it. Soon, the conversation gets interrupted when Captain Anderson speaks over the intercom and asks for Shepard to meet with him. I swear the dialogue options you can choose in this game are either be a genuine and nice person, be direct, or a complete raging asshole. I mean, you have to cover the spectrum, I guess. It just seems like you only have black and white responses. There is no middle ground. A lot of RPGs fall into this trap and it's a shame. The only game that nailed it in my opinion was The Witcher 3. On the way to Captain Anderson, you have the option to talk to some of your crew. I chose to speak with a dude called Navigator Presley. While talking to him, he also states that he is skeptical about the mission we are embarking on. He doesn't like that Captain Anderson is in charge, and he also doesn't like Nihilus because he's an alien. Yeah, you will see soon enough that a lot of humans have xenophobia in this game, and trust me, there are some characters that take it to the extreme. Ashley. And with these characters, you have the option to either agree with them like a dick, or you can reprimand them and tell them that they're racist. It's pretty funny to see the reaction. I love how in this game, they really show what humans are like. Ain't no way, when talking about human nature, that we would just be a-okay with allying ourselves with aliens. We're skeptical beings. Sometimes humans are just mean. So it makes sense to include this in the game, and I appreciate it. It makes it so they don't paint humans in a bright light. The opposite happens, actually. When we make it to the place we're supposed to meet Captain Anderson, we see Nihilus instead. Here's when it is revealed that there is more to this mission than we realized, making Joker and Presley's skepticism understandable. We are told that we're doing an undercover pickup run of some kind. But when we press Anderson on why we weren't told this sooner, all he says is, "It was on a need-to-know basis." Damn, it's almost like we needed to know this sooner. This answer just felt like a half-assed way of answering the player's question. They could have thought of something better, such as maybe the council wanted to wait to give the okay for some reason. Maybe they were afraid Shepard would tell the rest of the crew when he shouldn't. Both explanations are miles better than just saying it was on a need-to-know basis. But after that is when we are told the big news. The object that we're picking up is known as a beacon of Prothean origin. Protheans are an ancient race that took place before the formation of the Council, the Alliance, and so forth. They went bye-bye 50,000 years ago. They are the race that, what is told at the beginning of the game at least, built the mass relays, the Citadel, ship drives, and so forth. Essentially, without them, the Mass Effect wouldn't be a thing. So it goes without saying that taking this beacon would be a huge plus for all races in the universe. It is also noted that Nihilus is evaluating us for a chance to enlist with the Spectres, making Shepard the first human Spectre. To get some exposition out of the way again, what is a Spectre? The Spectres are essentially a rank that only answers to the Council regardless of what race they are. They are able to break any law and do anything in order to have their mission completed. Ethics don't really matter to the Spectres, and the beginning intro to the game connects to this. Udina was making the call to the Council, speaking on her behalf of joining the Spectres. And after the conversation is complete, Joker says over the intercom that something bad is happening on the planet's surface. And a video shows of a couple soldiers shooting at unknown enemies, and then all of a sudden a huge fucking ship appears and the video stops. This means something bad is going on and we need to find out what it is. And I love this introduction to the game so much. You understand your goal, you understand what is at stake for humanity when it comes to being asked to join the Spectres, but also you have this unknown threat which will more than likely be there throughout the entirety of the game. Fuck it, throughout the entire series. And I'm always a sucker for a story that has to do with saving the universe. I don't know why, maybe it's because of my unhealthy addiction to playing Halo over the years. This causes us to land along with Kaiden and some other dude, I have no idea what his name is, and he just isn't important, as you'll see why soon. We would have gone with Nihilus, but he likes to go alone, so whatever, homie, we don't need you. This brings us to what combat is like. Combat is weird, to say the least. You have your traditional aim, fire, swap weapons with the wheel button, and so forth. What is weird is the button layouts for the game. Your spacebar is to sprint, and shift is to bring up your abilities for you and your squad. You can of course remap your control scheme to certain buttons, but just having this layout in the first place is super weird. Never have I ever played a game where the spacebar was used to sprint. And when you do sprint, it only lasts for like 0.2 seconds and it doesn't even feel like you are sprinting. No wonder one of the most downloaded mods on Nexus is to have unlimited sprint in the game. I think this should have just been a thing in the game, or at least have a stamina bar that you can upgrade in order to sprint longer and faster. And throughout the game, I made the mistake of not noticing the hotbar at all, where you can quickly slot your abilities to number keys. I wish they would have just done that automatically. Most games do it anyways. Why doesn't this game have that? I have no idea. Keep in mind, throughout all of my reviews and analysis videos, I always play on normal difficulty because that is where the majority of players are going to play. Considering it is base level, it should be the most balanced out of all the difficulties. I shit you not, I only died a couple of times in the game, and it was stupid deaths. Normal mode is stupid easy, especially when you upgrade your armor and guns. And during the late game, you will have your Shepard decked the fuck out, and by that point, combat just isn't fun anymore. you will slaughter any enemy in your way without taking much damage at all. But the main thing I like about combat, the other games in this series didn't follow, was the overheating of your gun instead of having an ammo capacity. I love this feature because it gives enemies the ability to disrupt your guns so it is overheated until the combat encounter is over and you are required to use a different gun. It opens the game to add these little difficulty modifiers that are needed even though they are sometimes annoying. Plus, in games, I always find it painstakingly annoying when games give you so little ammo, so you have to explore the level to try to find more. The only game to really get this right, in my opinion, was like The Last of Us or Resident Evil. For one, it makes sense because you were in the apocalypse, but you also have the ability to melee and stealth, so it isn't the end of the world. If it were to happen in Mass Effect, it would no doubt be a negative to the game. At least in the later entries, they give you enough ammo so you don't have to worry about it too much. And of course, it wouldn't be Mass Effect without having the ability to manage your squad and how they fight, heal, and so forth. I am going to be completely honest, on the normal difficulty, I never had the need to manage them. I just let them do their own thing and I still managed to only die twice in the game. Bottom line is, if you want the definitive Mass Effect experience, I recommend you play on the hard difficulty. That way you're required to participate in most of the gameplay mechanics in the game. Difficulty was a huge flaw, and I wish they balanced it better. It makes it worse when you realize that this is the Legendary Edition where everything is remastered. They could have easily fixed the difficulty balancing. To delve deeper into the different types of equipment and guns you have, they all kind of look the same, never mind the different paint jobs they have. There may be a couple of gun manufacturers that have different looks than others, and to make matters worse, the menu in which you can equip and unequip these things are complicated for no fucking reason. The names that they give these guns are way too boring, long, and confusing. The menu in which you can select these things is just not good. I've gotten confused so many times about what gun is which because, like I said before, they all kind of look the same. And when looting, there is so many times where you'll just get duplicates of the same gun and you wouldn't even know until you're at the screen to equip these things. So then you will have to go one by one to break these guns down to Omnigel, or you just have to go to a vendor and one by one again, sell the guns and hope to God you don't sell the wrong one. Like I said, everything is so unnecessarily convoluted. This affects weapon and armor upgrades as well. You are forced to loot literally everything because you don't know if these upgrades are going to be better than the one you have to equip. This makes it so your inventory is equivalent to a person that is on an episode of Hoarders. You just get copious amounts of shit, and half of the time they're duplicates. They could have fixed this by giving upgrades, guns, and armor more memorable names. Or they should have given the player a certain number of weight that they can carry, and if they go over that, they'll be over encumbered. So then, GardenGnome, what part of the combat do you like then? The shooting feels responsive. I like how you can order your party around. The cover system's decent. It's just that everything else is either mid or subpar. Things that other games during this time would have done a lot better. By no means does it ruin the game. I think everyone would agree when I say Bioware tends to put their attention on dialogue and story rather than gameplay. So with that, the subpar combat is acceptable. Anyways, back to the story. As we drop onto the planet, everything seems normal until some robots absolutely demolish our homie Jenkins. From here, you pretty much just push through more waves of these tiny robots that are not hard at all to destroy. It is also important to mention that this is when the tutorial of the game is happening, teaching you how to heal yourself, order your team around, and so forth. Traditional stuff you can expect from Bioware. Eventually, you will come across the person that was in the video before we drop down on the planet. Ashley. She's being pinned down by these robotic soldiers known as the Geth. Don't worry, I will get into what the Geth are later. After saving her, we talked with her about what happened to her squad, why she was here in the first place, and so forth. Apparently, when she was going to the beacon, she and her team got ambushed and she was the only one left. Knowing this, she's recruited into our squad. I don't understand why they sent in another group of soldiers if we had the ship with the capability to do everything stealth-like. It just seems like these soldiers kind of fucked everything up. We should have been the recon team as well as the team to secure the beacon, but I mean, if these people were already stationed here prior to the knowledge of everything going on, then just take my critique and throw it in the trash. It is also mentioned that the Geth have always been behind the veil for 300 years, and it is odd that they have just now decided to come out, implying that there's more to the story than what is being told at the moment, putting intrigue into the player, and I love it. Going further, you are then introduced to husks, which are humans being transformed into mindless husks. I will say that they could have done a lot better with the atmosphere of this section and the reveal of what the Geth are. It is memorable, but it could have been a lot more suspenseful. Just my opinion, these guys are not difficult at all. They just tend to come at you in swarms. I would say you have to be careful, but no, you really don't have to. We then later rescued some humans. Both were overseeing the excavation that was happening according to Ashley. This person tells us that the beacon was moved to another location, but when that happened, they got ambushed by Geth and the Marines that were with them sacrificed their lives to save them. One of the more interesting things here is that Dr. Manuel, it seems like he is heavily traumatized by the event, or at least he's always like this, but he spouts nonsense whenever he gets the chance. Or is it nonsense? He starts spouting end of the universe stuff about destruction, death, no hope, and so forth. If you caught on, it is a foreshadowing to the later events of all the games in the series. Mostly introduction of Reapers, which we'll get into later. Foreshadowing in games is something that I love, and not a lot of games do it nowadays. And if they do, a lot of the time it isn't very good foreshadowing. And for it being a Bioware game where it is essentially a soap opera in space, it makes it even more interesting. Speaking of interesting, when you press the 2 about a Turian in the area, which we're talking about Nihilus here, the insane doctor will confirm but describes another Turian that isn't Nihilus, saying that this one is a leader of the enemy, a prophet of sorts, but the other doctor brushes him off as well as Kaiden. I understand that this character's crazy, or at least has severe mental illness, but this is the destruction of the world we're talking about. At least, take his words into consideration. There's a low chance that this individual is going to come up with a full-blown lie about a Turian. Chances are that there is an ounce of truth here. Just to blow this guy off is stupid to me, and for Shep to not have a choice to press him further irritates me, but whatever. And going off of that, we hit a cutscene that shows Nihilus zeroing in on another Turian, most likely the Turian that the doctor was talking about. And to make it even more obvious, this Turian looks implanted with all sorts of technology. It is confirmed that this guy's name is Saren, and he is a Spectre as well. To make this go quicker, while talking to Saren, Nihilus turns his back and gets offed unexpectedly. When we then get in control of Shep, you can see that this big ass ship flying away, indicating that Saren is probably our main antagonist of this game. The setup of Saren being the bad guy is decently thought out, I guess. It would have been a lot better if we got the chance to spend a little bit of time with Nihilus before his ultimate demise. That way, when he is offed, we would have a deeper connection with him and an emotion would have been brought out when Saren shoots him. But when it happens the way it does, I'm just like, okay, I totally get that's the point. Nihilus's death will lead to an eventual political struggle for humans. It is not necessarily meant to engage the player with strong emotions. All I'm saying is it would have been better to just have both combined. I don't know, maybe it's just me. When we proceed to find Nihilus's body, a worker emerges behind some crates. He says that he saw all that happened with Saren killing Nihilus, and when you press him further on why the Geth haven't found him yet, his explanation is, I was taking a nap while working. Damn, I wish I had mandatory nap hour here in America. This leads us through an admittedly boring series of events. You must go down this catwalk and take out an ass load of enemies. Take out more enemies through the same looking catwalk things, and in doing so, you must defuse 3 bombs, which was so unneeded. It was just a way to extend the mission time. You must go to each one of these bombs and sit for a solid 7 to 10 seconds, then do the next one. This doesn't seem like much when you are actively trying to stop Saren in what feels like a tense situation with a fight against time. This little obstacle on the road just feels annoying. Look, I get it. I'm overanalyzing, but that is the point of this video, so bite me. So with Saren gone, we come across the beacon. Want to know something I just do not understand? Why didn't Saren just take the beacon with him? Or at least plant a charge on the thing instead of planting them on the bridge. I understand the beacon may be useful for Saren, but destroying it is better than leaving it for Shepard to encounter, even more of a reason to take it with him. Seems like an oversight to me. Regardless, while talking over what to do next, Ashley's dumbass approaches the beacon and gets sucked into it against her will. This causes Shep to be a hero and throw her out of the way and have himself get sucked in. At a certain point, the beacon gives a vision to Shep that isn't understandable at this point in the game, and when the vision ends, the beacon explodes with Shep getting knocked out cold. So now the game sets up a bit of a mystery. What exactly was the vision? What did Saren want with it? What is the council going to think of Nihilus's death? Shit like this is what gets me heavily interested in the plot. Interesting questions that need answers. Not to mention this happens all of a sudden. getting the player into the thick things quickly instead of dragging it out like most games nowadays. Regardless, a cutscene hits where we see Saren and someone who is known as the Matriarch. This is when you get to see Bioware's obsession with the over-sexualizing women on full display. When the Matriarch tells Saren that Shep used the beacon, Saren throws a tantrum. Yet all of this could have been avoided if he either took the beacon with him or destroyed it so Shep couldn't use it. One of the things that irritated me in games is when an antagonist does something to their detriment with no real reason behind why they made that decision. If Saren had a legitimate reason for leaving the beacon behind, it would be all okay. But he doesn't, which then makes this a writing mistake, or I am the one who's stupid, either or. When Shep wakes up, it is said that he was out for a little less than a day according to Dr. Chakwas. Chakwas, I love that name. Ashley then wants to take the blame for what happened. In all honesty, it was her fault considering she was fucking careless. This is Prothean technology we're talking about, a technology that is extremely valuable in which most races know little about. So you walk towards it? I really wanted to press the "you were careless" option, but I am a good guy and good guys aren't dicks. Anyways, Shep tells Dr. Chakwas about his vision, but then Captain Anderson interrupts. The whole conversation deals with Saren and how his relationship with the Geth could be dangerous if he isn't stopped. It is also mentioned that this guy hates humans. Xenophobia is going to be a huge thing in this game, huh? But eventually we tell Anderson about the vision just after we touch the beacon. And after telling him, he's like, "We need to tell the council." It is already established that the council has their hesitation towards humanity, so why in the hell would telling them about a vision make them believe we're telling the truth? Thank God the game understands this and is self-aware enough to include a dialogue option for Shep to say exactly what I mentioned, but this also brings up the belief system that Anderson has that I appreciate from a writing standpoint. Anderson believes that Saren is doing this for the sole reason of wiping humanity from the face of the galaxy. Spoiler alert, that is not what he's doing. But the fact that Anderson believes this really brings to light the situation between races in the galaxy. At this stage, humans are the newcomers. With that, it makes sense that humans are going to be reserved and judgmental. I just like the awareness that the writers had. They made things realistic and that makes this whole thing intriguing. But the next thing you know, we get introduced to a huge set piece. We get to see the Citadel, the home of the council. Pretty much Washington, D.C., but in space. This thing is fucking massive, and I'll admit, every time I see this, it brings awe. After, we get to see a poop stain smeared on a baby wipe. Ambassador Udina. We see this man arguing with the council about what had happened on Eden Prime. So, on every playthrough, I always notice this shit. Udina's voice peaks so bad. It's like when Bioware was recording audio, the voice actor had his mouth directly over the microphone and the devs just decided to go along with it instead of re-recording. It's whatever, I suppose, but it makes me just annoyed whenever Udina speaks. Regardless, Udina is an absolute prick, and his personality is identical to how he speaks. A traditional politician who is oblivious to what is exactly going on in the galaxy. Whenever there's a dialogue wheel that is directed at this guy, I will always choose the asshole option regardless of the context. He is that much of a dick. In all honesty, he has no redeeming factors. He hides behind the facade of caring for humanity when in reality he's just power hungry. Anyways, when talking to this dude, he lets us know that Saren is their top agent and it will be hard to convince the council that this guy's a douchebag. We are then set loose within the Citadel with our main goal being to meet with Anderson and speak with the council. I just want to say that the Citadel is fucking fantastically made. The ambience with chatter, the different colors here, the atmosphere, literally everything was well made. I will admit, there is times where I got lost in the Citadel, not knowing where to go, but it just comes with playing the game after a year or so. On the way to speak with the council, we have a chance to talk to a character named Garrus, a Turian that is employed by C-Sec. C-Sec is pretty much just the FBI of the Citadel. While overhearing a conversation he is having with another Turian, we find out that this man is also looking for Saren, making us have a mutual interest that will be important later. Garrus also states that his boss will be presenting his findings on Saren to the council. Another spoiler alert, the findings are jack shit, and I have no idea why this point was included in the dialogue. It would have been better for Garrus to have his reservations of Saren, and that's it. That was, in all honesty, a good enough excuse to have Shep find him later after talking with the council. We didn't need the extra shit that ended up barely being mentioned. And it's worse when you realize that Saren is a Spectre. So even if people wanted to investigate this dude, it would be an extremely hard thing to do, and it's probably best to just not investigate. This whole sequence of speaking with the council irritates me though. They say that no evidence has been given to support a charge of treason. What I don't understand is why not revoke the man's Spectre status until there is enough evidence? Considering there was one eyewitness that is doubtful the Geth took out a Spectre, and our crew has an airtight alibi for not killing Nihilus, who the fuck else would it have been that took out Nihilus? Like I said, it would have been best to revoke Saren's Spectre status until we can prove that he is guilty. Also, as far as I know, Shep had no idea who Saren was until after this sequence. So that's even... Never mind. Also, does the council not find it odd that Saren was just all of the sudden on Eden Prime? He had no business there in the first place, and when you press this dude on being there, he uses the excuse, Nihilus was gone so his files were passed down to me. That still doesn't make sense. I assume that we gave our case to the council shortly after Shep got picked up on Eden Prime. This includes Saren's involvement. That is way too short of a time for files to just magically be passed down to Saren. In my opinion, this whole court session with the council was badly thought out. Saren's alibi doesn't make sense at all. The council should, in all honesty, be more logical than they are, and the dialogue options that you can say should have been different. Literally all Shepard does is bitch and complain about the council not believing him instead of giving logical explanations. The only logical response that Shepard gives is when he asks the question of why Saren was even on Eden Prime in the first place. Anyways, the council ends the session by saying Saren isn't guilty, which results in us trying to gather enough evidence in order to change the council's mind. But before that, we have an interesting conversation with Anderson. I guess he and Saren have had a history together. We'll get to that soon, so don't worry. But getting back on track with the evidence, Kaiden gives the proposition to find out where Garrus is and ask about his findings on Saren that he told us about earlier. And in order to find this dude, we must speak with a man named Harkin. Anderson also tells us to search for a guy named Barlow Vaughn, someone who works for the Shadow Broker. The Shadow Broker is like essentially an anonymous person who sells information to people willing to buy it. But in the meantime, I decided to do some side quests. The first one I encountered was a Solarian named Chorban trying to scan the Keepers. The Keepers are pretty much a race that has always been on the Citadel even before all the races discovered it. It is noted that these Keepers are not to be fucked with, not because they'll kick your ass, but because they maintain the Citadel. So when you talk to this dude, he tries to play it off like he wasn't doing anything. He's a horrible liar. So we try to pry it out of him by being a good person, which oddly works. He says he's scanning these Keepers to get more information on them. The authorities don't want this to happen because it disturbs them. Chorban disagrees with this and asks us to do the work for him. What the hell? Why not? So you just have to go around the Citadel and scan as much as you can for money and XP. So I'm happy. So while we're doing that, let's go find Garrus. When going to Chor's Den, we are attacked by assassins which are hired by Saren. I understand why Saren wants to take us out, but it is fucking ballsy doing this at the Citadel, especially after we just got done with the court session. Chor's Den is pretty much a strip club, but includes aliens.
Yeah.
But here's when we meet Wrex, a Krogan merc who is battle ready at any second, including now. This whole argument has to do with a person named Fist. We'll get to him soon. I fucking love Wrex. Wrex just gives off this alpha male energy who doesn't give a fuck about anything other than wrecking other people's shit. I guess this goes for every Krogan in the game, but Wrex does it the most. Anyways, he walks away. Don't worry, he'll come back soon enough. But this brings us to the man named Harkin. When we ask this dude where Garrus is, he says yes, but then proceeds to ask us if we know Anderson's secret. The game never gave me a reason to care about this secret, considering Anderson has been a good homie so far, so I said don't waste my time. But this dude keeps asking. Like, I get it, this dude's supposed to be an annoying drunk, but I legitimately got annoyed because I just wanted to find Garrus and go on my way. Granted, he only does this once, but it got under my skin for no reason. Maybe this is just a me problem, but after ignoring what Harkin says, he just gives you the information and that's it. I think it would have been better to just know where Garrus is right off the bat rather than have this pointless conversation to find where he is. I understand for the people who want to know the secret why this conversation would be justified, but Anderson tells you anyway before you leave the Citadel, so this conversation is pointless regardless. So we went over to the med clinic where Garrus is. Here we witness some thugs roughing up a doctor that is connected to Garrus in some way. But after seeing us, the thugs take the doctor hostage. This didn't work out too well because Garrus was sneaking around. Because the thug was distracted, this gave a good shot for Garrus in which he offs the thug. A combat sequence then breaks out in which was way too easy to complete. Then we talked to the doctor and Garrus. I guess the thugs were there because Fist told them to after a certain Quarian visited her. They didn't want the doctor to tell Garrus about this Quarian, which prompted this whole fiasco. I like this setup because you can easily tell that this is an elaborate cover-up in order to keep evidence of Saren's crimes getting into the hands of Garrus. Although I had some problems with the overall court session that we had with the council, I do like the detective nature of these quests that have to do with gathering evidence. I was invested to find out more. I wanted to know who this Quarian is. I wanted to know the specific evidence that was being covered up. Up to this point, this is a great setup for the game. I know I said that originally at the beginning of the video, but seeing it formulate all the way to this point is great. To go forward, the doctor explains that this Quarian wanted to set up a meeting with the Shadow Broker. She was on the run, so she figured she could give information in exchange for a place to hide. But the doctor fucked up and sent her to Fist. It is important to know that Fist doesn't work for the Shadow Broker anymore, and he isn't happy about it. So this sets up a confrontation that we'll see later in the game between us and Fist. So the next order of business is to take Garrus with us and find Wrex, considering he is also looking for Fist. And when we do see him next, Wrex is making threats to a C-Sec officer. This dude is the epitome of Giga Chad. Alpha male type shit. Top G. I'm gonna stop. But we talk to the homie and all he states is, I'm going to kill Fist. And that's it. He's part of your team. Part of me hates how simple this was, but part of me loves how easygoing Wrex is when interests align. We both want to go after Fist. Lit. Let's team up, homie. I don't know. I just have a huge crush on Wrex, I guess. So next stop is to go after Fist, but when we get to the strip club, a firefight breaks out and we are forced to fight through waves of Fist's men. I have no idea how they know we're going after him. We were just here before and no harm happened to us. I understand this is a video game and you have to accept these things, so whatever. And when we corner Fist, it turns out that this guy is a huge weenie that begs for his life. And it goes without saying, he is also a piece of shit. He tells us that he sent the Quarian to meet with the Shadow Broker. The problem is, no one ever meets the Shadow Broker. And since the Quarian didn't know, that Fist used that to his advantage and played the Quarian. This is what I love about this game so far, and what I love about Fist, even though we only see him for like 5 minutes. Fist doesn't fall into the stereotype of tough, brutish enemy, though he kind of is, I guess. He's more so a manipulative asshole. He would rather manipulate someone and get that person off that way than just do it himself. This is something different than most games that I play, and I must give it to Bioware here. Regardless, Fist tells us exactly where the meeting is taking place. Then Wrex just kills the guy. I mean, I understood why Wrex wanted to kill him considering it was part of his contract, but it would have been useful to keep this dude alive, so I agree with Garrus when he yells at Wrex. After this, we must fight through more waves of enemies which are no trouble at all if I'm being honest. But this brings us to saving the Quarian from a botched meeting. We found out that this Quarian's name is Tali, so we took her to the human embassy so she could explain everything to Udina and Anderson. Essentially, she waited for a Geth to be separated from its unit. When this happened, she removed the memory core and decrypted a message that proves the guilt of Saren. The message pretty much says word for word that Saren went to Eden Prime for the beacon. Yeah, it's a huge coincidence that a confession like this was said, though considering this is a space soap opera that relies heavily on fiction, I'm not going to be too hard on it. If this shit was a realistic space story, yes, I would have had a problem with it. But that isn't all. The recording also shows the involvement of the matriarch that we saw earlier, but this time she mentions something called the Reapers. The Reapers are going to end up being this huge thing later on in the story, so keep that in the back of your mind. Anyways, after giving the human embassy this information, Tali asks to join our squad, in which I say yes, obviously, because Tali's mommy. So here's when you can explore more of the Citadel before you go before the council and present your case to prove Saren's guilty. This means I get to pick up more side quests. There was one where I met a dude named Samesh. Samesh claims that his dead wife is being held by the Alliance for no apparent reason, even though he's asking that her remains be returned to him. When you talk to the person that knows the details surrounding this fiasco, he simply states that the body is important to the Alliance, that the damage on her body is something that they haven't seen before. If you really want to know how to better defend against the Geth, wouldn't you think it would be a great idea to talk to a Quarian about this issue, considering they are the ones that created the Geth? This side quest was just very vague and not the best. It's either understanding the reason behind keeping the man's wife or siding with the civilian. One is clearly better than the other. Side with the civilian, and which is your only option if you want any type of finality. This makes things boring. I wish the evil option here was to just agree with the Alliance soldier and not get the body back instead of it being a more dick option of releasing the body. It's like you have no sense of choice. You only dictate how Shepard's tone is. Regardless, we then present the evidence to the council in which they agree to strip his Spectre status, which they should have done in the first place. But here is when the Reapers are brought up. The Reapers are a race of sentient machines that wiped out the Prothean race 50,000 years ago. It is said that the Geth worshipped them like gods. After the devastation of the Protheans, they vanished. The council expressed interest in this matter, which prompted Anderson and us to speak on it. Want to know something that annoys me though? After the council expressed their interest, they quickly shut everything down after we explained it to them. So why did you even ask in the first place? It felt like a waste of words, which in my mind is just bad writing. You can't just engage the player's curiosity, give long-winded exposition, and then completely shut down the curiosity afterwards. You're only going to make the player angry. It didn't make sense to me when I first played this game, and it still doesn't make sense to me now. But after Udina throws a bitch fit about the council not sending a fleet after Saren, we come up with the bright idea of the council sending us instead, finally giving Shep the role of a Spectre. The council hesitantly agrees, mostly just the Turian counselor. This causes a speech to be made with a bunch of people coming to watch the commencement. The oddest thing though is no one talks or claps, it's just quiet. I mean, should at least be happy for Shep, but anyway, since we're a Spectre, we can get Spectre guns. So Anderson's like, you should check it out. But when I get down there, the shit is expensive. Though it is important to mention that it isn't hard to get money in this game, so we'll get there eventually. Remember when we met with that dude who was scanning the keepers? So I'll come across another side quest that connects with that one. This was a cool thing to happen, and it surprised me. I love it when games unexpectedly do this. It gives more reason to explore the environment that you are in, and it makes side quests more interesting to engage with. The person we meet with is Jalid, and claims that one of his colleagues has been following him and plans to kill him. He proceeds to tell us to talk to him and tell him not to follow Jalid anymore. And when we meet with Chorbon, the dude we met before, he says that he never intended to kill Jalid, even though he has goons with guns behind him. I'm not entirely sure if this character was lying or not. I am pointing to that he was lying. I like how the specific quest doesn't have a character blatantly lying to you, acting like the player's 12 years old. We're adults. We can make the assumptions ourselves. So seeing this was pretty dank in my eyes. Chorbon proceeds to say that he and Jalid were the first ever to create something that can scan the keepers. The problem arose when Jalid kept the data and intended to sell it, so we tell the dude to stop scanning. But when we meet with Jalid, I may or may not have agreed to scan stuff for him in exchange for some extra cash. Oops. This brings us to meet with Anderson and Udina again near the Normandy. I guess Anderson has stepped down as being the captain of the Normandy and gave that title to us. During this, Anderson admits that he was once considered for the Spectre role until he messed up somehow. If you press him further, he will admit that he was on a mission with Saren. Saren did some bad shit, blamed Anderson, and the rest is history. This is why Anderson is so hellbent on fighting Saren, and rightfully so. This backstory between the two was the same thing that Harkin was trying to tell us. Except Harkin was a dick and I didn't want to listen to him. The thing I'm starting to notice though in Bioware games is all of a sudden some characters will just out of nowhere give huge exposition dumps on their past, their race, and so forth. It can be very annoying at times, but this is something you will have to get used to if you're playing any Bioware game. At the moment of writing this, I have been playing Dragon Age. It is extremely prevalent there, even more so than Mass Effect. Regardless, Anderson and Udina give us some hints on where to find clues of Saren's whereabouts. Feros, Noveria, and the Artemis Tau cluster. The latter thing I mentioned is where the matriarch's daughter is, Liara Tassoni. Considering she is a recruitable squad member, I'll go after her first. When we get on the ship, here's when you can make a speech to your squad mates. It isn't really anything too crazy. You choose certain dialogue options and craft your own speech, which I like. It gives a sense of control over your Shepard, like he is your character. A thing every RPG should do in my eyes. So when we drop down on the planet in which Liara is being held on, we're introduced to the Mako. In the Legendary Edition, the controls, I bet, are a lot better than the original, but that doesn't mean that the jank isn't still there. Of course, pushing the W key will make you go forward, but you steer with the mouse. That doesn't sound too bad, right? Well, it becomes odd when the ASD keys can make you go forward as well. It gets incredibly frustrating, and I wish they would have done something normal here. Something like the Warthog from Halo. Watch me make this entire Mako critique and then look back and see the controls are set to original rather than new and improved. Actually, I'm gonna check right now. Yep, it is better to turn the mouse steering off, so that is my bad. But even then, the Mako combat is laughably boring. I like to compare this to Halo and their Warthog sections. In the Halo games, that shit is fun and you look forward to it because of how asshole puckering it is. And literally everything around you, at least something is happening. Here, well, it looks like Arizona sand dunes. It is a boring ass setting mixed in with mid-combat where enemies usually die quickly. I think the game would have been better off if they completely cut the Mako out of the game and used the development time on better level layout and dialogue. But that's my opinion, feel free to leave yours down below. And speaking on level layout, there are times during this mission where you hit a wall, have to get out of the Mako, go into a building, open the wall thingy, get back into the Mako, and drive again. And keep in mind, you have to do this 2 times during the mission. Yeah, this was the most tedious mission in the game by far. There should be no reason to put that many needless obstacles. If they had just made this a straightforward mission, it would have been fine. It certainly would have been a lot better than this. Anyways, there is a certain part where you are forced out of the Mako and you must fight on foot. And because Bioware hates you, you gotta fight this big ass robot dinosaur Geth, which anytime one of their weapons hits you, it almost completely depletes your health. Even Tali got her ass handed to her. It's weird though because this was the only difficult spike in the game. Everything else was easy to manage. I don't know. But this brings us to meeting Liara. She is in sort of a predicament. The cool thing about this is if you do other missions before this, Liara will become more and more beaten up, which is cool if I'm being honest. She tells us we're on our own for finding a way to take down the barrier. So what does Shepard do? We fire a fucking laser at it. Problem solved. But in order to even activate the laser, you have to do this weird guessing minigame that was more what the fuck rather than fun. But Liara is like, how did you get in here? When the mining beam explosion was incredibly loud, I had to throw my headphones off because it was that loud. There ain't no way in hell she didn't hear all of that commotion. And even when you tell her, she's like, oh, that makes sense. Because we used the laser, it triggered some sort of earthquake. A whole 5 minutes later, that makes perfect sense. So we fight some baddies, get the hell out of Dodge, and get back on the Normandy. Going back to how I thought of the mission, it was the Mako section was not good, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but the rest was decent. It's your typical fighting enemies type of thing. The only thing I wish was different would have been the atmosphere and overall look of the mission. It felt dull and boring, even inside of the mining cave, but I guess it makes sense given that it is a cave. Usually after any mission takes place, there's a crew meeting that happens. Here at least it goes over Liara and what she's done for a living, her background, her connection to her mother, and so forth. This part was pretty interesting to me, for the most part at least. Liara states that she's been studying the Protheans for 50 years. She reminds us of this one too many times.
I have spent the past 50 years.
She also tells us that she's 106 years old. So Asari live for a long time. And according to the wiki, they can live up to about 1,000 years and sometimes over. So Liara is but a baby in the grand scheme of things. And because of her young age, her research isn't exactly taken seriously. And keep in mind, her research has to do with the Protheans. She makes a bold claim that the Protheans weren't the first civilization to just randomly disappear. She believes that others did as well, and we all know this was the doing of the Reapers. This is blatant foreshadowing right here, and I don't know if I like it or not. This foreshadowing feels more like a spoiler rather than an actual foreshadowing of a later event. This irritated me even after playing all of the games. And when you mention the Reapers to Liara, she of course gets confused. We proceed to tell her about the events that happened on Eden Prime, which prompts her to miraculously understand what the beacon actually does. I get that she is a scientist that specializes in Prothean artifacts and technology. It's just, I highly doubt a Prothean beacon came into contact with the Asari all of a sudden, which caused them to understand everything on what it does. It's a little far-fetched to me, but this is a video game and it takes place in the future. The funniest shit though is when Liara talks about Shep like she's in love with him, and Ashley over here gets incredibly butthurt. Like, dog, I never once expressed interest in you. Please settle down. And to add on to this, all of a sudden Liara gets lightheaded out of the blue. Not to mention the voice acting that complements it seems like she's faking it when she isn't. I don't know. This always sort of bothered me for no reason. It just makes me not like Liara's character. At least in the first game, that is. Regardless, you have the option to let the council in on what is going on, or you can just not talk to them. I don't think there's any consequence that comes out of this. It just depends on how much you get annoyed with them being all up in your business and not believing you. Nothing too important happens. You just brief them on the last mission. The next mission on the list is to go to Feros and find out what exactly is happening on the surface. Here you pretty much fight some Geth until you meet up with the leader of the colony that settled there. I mean, you really don't talk to this dude all that long. Another fight breaks out. To be honest, I really don't understand why they did this. Why not just have the fighting take place before talking to the dude? Whatever, I guess. But when we do talk to him in full, he tells us that the main Geth hideout is at a place called Exogeny Headquarters. Exogeny is essentially a genetics research company that may or may not be up to some shady business, in which we will find out later. Not to mention they literally own the entire colony. This is what I always loved about Mass Effect. They take their time to flesh out literally every world within the game, whether it be big or small, and usually when you talk to NPCs you find out important lore bits that complement the story well. This brings us to a Mako section on the planet, which is miles better than the one used to find Liara. This one is just a straight shot to your objective with many enemies dispersed in different areas. I guess this section is more engaging considering there are more obstacles in the way, as well as more difficult enemies. It goes without saying that this isn't an amazing section, but it is an improvement over the last. There is a part here though where you can get out of the Mako and talk to a bunch of survivors bunkered in. These are employees of ExoGeni along with the higher up that is a total a-hole. At every turn when you try to pry into the business of what happened on this planet, he will either insult you or hide behind the "it was classified" information card. He even lied to the woman about the survivors at the other camp being dead. Usually I would totally tear down this character and say it's bad writing to have a character be all bad, but it sort of fits here considering this dude is the embodiment of corporate greed and power. It makes sense for this dude to be extremely selfish and only care about the company. Plus it makes the player question what is really going on this planet. Nothing is ever explicitly told to you. Hell, you don't even get a hint. I love it and it makes me want to keep playing. Bioware always have these spurts of well thought out plots. It's a shame that they also have spurts of god awful writing. But we get a new side objective. The woman claims that her daughter is missing and is at ExoGeni headquarters, the same place where we're going anyway. But the dude tells us to not prod around the place. So I'm gonna prod around the place. And when we get there, we find her daughter who almost takes Shepard's head off. You would think she would look at her target before shooting, but I guess not. Simple gun safety is something not taught in the future, I suppose. This lady tells us that the Geth were looking for a life form that goes by the name of the Thorian. According to her, this thing is a plant that ExoGeni was studying. Using intuition, you can imagine that this was the thing ExoGeni was wanting to hide from the public. So we take this chick's ID, unlock some doors, battle some enemies until we get to a VI with a Krogan talking to it. We take out the Krogan and speak to the VI, and come to find out, this Thorian is located at the colony of people we first met when we landed on the planet. And this plant has the ability to infect people and mind control them. So this entire time, ExoGeni was examining the effects of mind control on the colonists. This was the reason that that one dude was so hellbent on not wanting us to prod around ExoGeni. Well shit, this section is a lot better than I remember. I understand that this entire plot is pretty cliche considering every media ever paints huge corporations as bad guys, but here they include mystery extremely well. Even landing on the planet, you felt this weird vibe. So kudos to Bioware, you nailed it here. But the fun ends when you fight through Geth and get to this one puzzle area. For some reason, I just could not understand what the puzzle meant. I understood the prompt that came before and explained everything, but when I was actively engaging with said puzzle, I had no idea what I was doing. I guess it's a personal issue. Whatever my brain reads numbers and math, it does not want to cooperate. It takes me longer than most people to solve problems like this. If you hand me anything related to words, literature, and so forth, I got it, sure. But numbers, you kill me now. But regardless, most people are going to trial and error this puzzle. These kind of puzzles suck and take up unnecessary time. They should have done something different here. Though when you do solve the puzzle, you destroy the shit that's attached to the building, solving the Geth problem. When we talk with the scientist's daughter again, she mentions that ExoGeni threatened her and told her she would disappear if she told anyone about what was going on. Extremely fucked up. So knowing this, we take her to her mother and confront the stuck-up employee. But here's when I get a little irritated. Here's when you have the option of a Paragon or Renegade option. For me at least, they were grayed out, meaning I can't choose any of them. Why is this shitty? It's shitty because this means you're forced to engage in side quests in order to get these options. I hate it when this happens in games. I would rather have a system that deals with charisma managed by skill points than have to deal with this stuff. If you don't do most side quests, you will be left out. And since side quests don't have indicators, you'll miss out on a lot of them. And it sucks even more when you realize in the first Mass Effect, these Paragon and Renegade dialogue options happen not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. At least in the later games, they become a lot more abundant, which means your Paragon or Renegade paths will increase faster, meaning you can engage with these more frequently. It's great that they learned from their mistakes, but I wish they would have fixed it with the Legendary Edition. So the only options I really have here is nicely tell the dude you're gonna off him, passive aggressively let him know you're gonna off him, or just straight up say you're gonna off him. Everybody clap it up for Bioware here for an amazing display of player choice. Our new objective is to stop the mind control that is going on with the colonists. The scientist gives us some gas grenades to knock the colonists out instead of killing them. It is important to note that you have two options here. You can save the colonists and gain Paragon points by using the gas grenades or melee them. If you shoot the colonists, you will get Renegade. You knock out the colonists in just one hit, so I'll just choose the Paragon option. You will always run into these zombie-like enemies. You can off them, you don't have to worry about repercussions from taking them out. And I like this style of choosing whether you want to go Paragon or Renegade through the means of gameplay rather than dialogue. Maybe that should have been the route they chose. During dialogue, have your intimidation and charm skill be the deciding factor on if you get certain options for Shepard during that said dialogue. Though now thinking about it, maybe it isn't the best option. It's something to think about. When we finally get to the colony, we see the leader we met before come out rambling on about fighting the mind control. Ultimately, he takes himself out. I'm gonna be honest here, this section of the game is amazing for the most part. Bioware leans into dark storytelling tremendously and it pays off. It shows that Shepard can't save everyone even when he tries to be his paragon self. I find this a critique on most sci-fi genre media. Most of the time, plot points end on a good note. The certain protagonist solves a problem then goes on to the next. Here you do your best to solve the problem, but even then there is a consequence. Anyways, this brings us to inside the facility where the Thorian is. Remember when the scientist's daughter said that this shit was a plant? Yeah, she failed to mention that this thing was a giant plant. And this plant is not cooperative whatsoever. So what does this mean? You must do the tedious thing of destroying the plant sacks that are guarded by zombies. It's confusing, but yeah, you have to destroy a few of these things and it isn't fun. The hordes are easy to go through. The sacks don't have much health at all. The only interesting thing is going up against the Asari clones because they're at least somewhat difficult. But finally, we took out the plant and the Asari that has been cloned is released. I guess she used to serve under Matriarch Benezia. This solidifies the fact that the Thorian was already under Saren's control, or at least was manipulated by him. After pressing her on why she even sided with the matriarch in the first place, all she says is, "Well, I followed her for most of my life, so I continue to follow her." Okay, well there was more to it than that, but that's the simplified version of what she said. It's realistic, sure, but it isn't that interesting. You don't learn much about the matriarch, and it kinda sucks. All that's told to you is that she's under Saren's control, which all of us know already. We just don't know how he's doing it. Anyways, the Asari tells us that Saren didn't want us to gain the knowledge of the Prothean, considering the Thorian was here long before the Protheans. It had knowledge of them. This caused Saren to attack the Exogeny headquarters, so we couldn't find anything there. I mean, if he really wanted to destroy it, he could have done a better job other than just having one ship there to stop us. In order to give us this extra knowledge, the Asari connects their mind with ours and gives us another vision just like the one on Eden Prime. I'd like to think there were hints within the red slideshow that is the Prothean vision, but now they just look like random stock photos that were edited. Except for the last part, I guess, since there's a literal Reaper flying. And after Shep is like, yeah, I still don't get it. Me either, man. Oh, we also learn about the name of Saren's ship. Its name is Sovereign. I mean, I guess it's important. Sovereign also has the ability to mind control. Someone can assume that Saren is mind controlled as well. Lots and lots of mind control is going on here. And to finally end our time on this planet, Shep and the crew discuss what happened and go over the next moves. Liara, being worried about us, asks if the cipher/knowledge of the Protheans made us ill. And I guess in order to make us feel better and have another person understand, we transfer the cipher to Liara, which in turn makes her not feel good. And sharing this information doesn't really help much besides progress our romance with her. All she says is, "Oh my goodness, Shep, you are so remarkable, strong-willed, amazing, handsome." It was so out of the blue and it didn't even feel genuine. Even Ashley expresses my same frustration.
Come on, get to the point. What did you see?
And when Liara gets pressed about it, she still doesn't reveal anything. So this whole sequence of sharing the cipher with her was a waste of time. Well, I guess not technically if you want to sleep with Liara, which I'm going to do. I mean, my only choices I have are either Liara or Ashley, a person who gives huge amounts of exposition and gets boring, or a person who is extremely racist and pushy. Yeah, Liara is the better option here. And speaking of Liara and Ashley, this is the perfect time to go over each character in our squad. In Mass Effect, you have a solid number of squad members you can bring on missions, talk to in between missions, and some you can romance. I think for this, just like I did with Hogwarts Legacy, I will be ranking each character on a numbered scale to keep things interesting. So to start off, we're going to talk about Garrus. Garrus is a Turian CSEC officer who is hard-headed about his moral values, loves confrontation, and does his best for what is good for the world, even if it means other people get hurt in the process. When you talk to your squad mates, it usually is done through the means of their own quarters on the Normandy. You can talk to them anytime you want, but typically you want to do this after the end of the main mission or a side mission. First, we learn about Garrus's frustration with CSEC and how he pretty much has to play by their rules. My question is, if that's the case, then why the hell is he still working for them or worked for them? I mean, it shouldn't be hard to just quit and find another job, right? I guess that's exactly what he did when he joined us, but before that, he states that as long as he gets his work done, it shouldn't matter how he does it. Essentially, he wants to do what a Spectre does. He even expresses how much happier he's working under us. Here's when he can really start to tell that you you will have a huge impact on how Garrus reacts to the world around him. He sort of has this young mentality of the world, and you can show him the ways of the world, for lack of a better word. The problem with your relationship with Garrus is with the dialogue options you can choose from. After he tells me that maybe he can do things his way for a change, and I respond with "that depends," Shepard just fucking yells at Garrus. All I wanted was for Shep to say, "Yeah, let's just not get innocents hurt, okay?" Not, "if it endangers civilians, it's a no-go, got it?" I think the voice actor did what the writers told him to do when it comes to the tone. I just think the writers fucked up with the options. The dialogue option I chose should have been explicit in what tone I was using. Simply saying "it depends" is not good enough, not even in the slightest. And after this reprimanding, Garrus does his little puppy dog eyes and gets sad. Fuck this game, bro. Garrus doesn't deserve that. The next time we talk with Garrus, it has to do a lot about his past, specifically with C-Sec, which I will admit I was most curious about. His excuse was he was living in his father's shadow, and apparently he was a well-decorated C-Sec officer who had a lot of accomplishments and was one of the best. This is a fair character point, but I would be lying if I said it was interesting. It isn't really, compared to all of the other squad members on the Normandy, and Garrus proceeds to talk about how his father's scared that Garrus will become like Saren. And I don't understand this at all, if I'm being honest. Garrus isn't even close to Saren's personality. Saren, as far as I can tell, is just evil, especially from what we heard from Captain Anderson, so just shoving this sentence in here seems off. It seems like they just put this in here because both Saren and Garrus are Turian. Anyways, Garrus explains how he was considered for joining the Spectres until his father talked him out of it. I get that living in your father's shadow is rough, but wouldn't this have been better if we met Garrus's father in the game? And to go further, Garrus mentions that his father doesn't like the idea of Spectres having ultimate power with no accountability. So are we just gonna ignore Saren getting his Spectre status removed because he literally broke the law and went rogue? I totally understand what his father is saying, but the dialogue worded it wrong, which can be an issue. Spectres have privileges, of course, but they also have accountability, which we just saw with Saren. You can't just go back and forth with an important plot point whenever you please. You need to stick with something and run with it. This is something little, but it is important. The thing I like about Garrus' conversations, though, is the fact that it feels like you're talking to one of your bros. For example, we have a conversation about one of Garrus' missions while being in C-Sec. I guess this is one Solarian who would harvest testicles and sell them to Krogan because they believed it would help them reproduce. We will get into the genophage and Krogan soon. It's just the way Garrus says this shit is what makes me laugh and think he's one of the bros.
They'll pay up to 10,000 credits each. That's 40,000 for a full set.
Anyways, this Solarian doctor he was talking about was growing these organs inside of people, which is disgusting, if I must say. He would clone organs inside of people, and when the time came, he would cut out the organs and sell them to people, most likely killing the subject that had the organ inside of them. So this brings a sort of detective mystery, dark storytelling-esque loyalty mission for Garrus. Considering this Solarian scientist got away and C-Sec didn't want Garrus chasing after him, Garrus still wants to get this guy and asks Shep if he would be down to help him. Fuck yeah, let's get this dude. So we board this creepy ass ship, and I will admit, it could have been creepier, but at least they put in enough effort to make this somewhat atmospheric. You have these test subjects that have the same look as the husks. They could have added a different texture here, but I guess not. This game was made in 2000s, so I mean, I can't complain. Eventually you will get to the doctor, and at first he seems to be someone that's trapped on the ship with no idea what's going on. After Garrus outs him, you have the option of either telling Garrus to back down, to take out the doctor, or to take out the doctor with a Mortal Kombat reference. I hate how there is no middle ground here at all. It's black and white most of the time with these dialogue options, but what can you do? Anyways, I chose the good boy option because Paragon points. I wanted to just take him out right then and there, but I really need those Paragon points. Plus, these dialogue options shape Garrus' personality in the long run. He can either be reserved, think before he's speaking kind of guy, or just be a renegade version of himself. Anyways, when we explain to Garrus why keeping him alive is a good idea, Garrus hesitantly agrees with you. Then the doctor, in a sarcastic manner, says thank you, but all of a sudden I just see Tali and Garrus whip out their guns and mow this dude down. I had no idea what happened here. At first I was confused and thought I picked the wrong dialogue option and was going to reload a save, but after looking it up, this outcome is supposed to happen when you choose to not take out the guy. I guess it makes sense to rather die than get tortured, but this shit happens so abruptly to where I was genuinely confused. It makes it worse when right after Garrus questions you on why we would agree to not kill this guy and then kill him anyway, even when I didn't fire a shot. Yeah, I did not like this mission's outcome. It was forced, abrupt, and it didn't give itself the proper time to make it all make sense. The only good thing to come out of Garrus's loyalty mission was that he becomes a better person / squad mate for the rest of the game. The next time we meet with Garrus is when he expresses his distrust with the Council. He questions on whether the Council is protecting Saren or not. I mean, I would imagine no, considering they literally stripped his Spectre status away and considered him a fugitive and a rogue that needs to be either brought back or killed. Anyways, Garrus just states that it's best to take him out instead of just bringing him to the Council. I pretty much say that it depends and we go our separate ways. So, what do I think of Garrus? Garrus is a homie and feels like a true friend when it comes to his personality and bringing him with you on missions. He has a funny banter, has good insight into things, and overall has a better moral system than the majority of characters in the game. What lacks here is the writing when it comes to dialogue choices and design for loyalty missions. The loyalty mission just wasn't good. The surprise of the Solarian just running away and Garrus shooting at him was something I disliked immensely. The mission would have been better off having the Solarian surrender to you. This will show Garrus that not everything needs to be killed for things to be better. Garrus as a character, at least in the first Mass Effect, is decent but isn't the best. Alright, so Ashley. Ashley kind of sucks most of the time. She's xenophobic, is extremely protective over people and things when she shouldn't be, is a loudmouth who feels the need to say something when she doesn't, and just gives off a Karen vibe if I'm being honest. Like the first time you ever talk to this bitch is right after you get all of your crew members. She expresses frustration at the fact that there are so many aliens on the Normandy that they have full access to the ship. She believes in the fact that humanity needs to rely on themselves in order to get things done, but without the help of the Prothean technology, humans would have never been able to even get to the Citadel, meet other races, been a part of the Council, and so forth. The argument she states about humanity relying on themselves is a load of horseshit. The part I love about talking with Ashley though is the dialogue options you can choose. Right after she says, the human race needs to rely on ourselves, Shep can respond by saying,
how do you get from relying on ourselves to mistreating our allies?
And to fucking make it worse, she quite literally says, but I'm not racist. Like bro, you can't be serious. I genuinely can't tell if Bioware was serious when they were writing her character or they did it just to make this character the worst one intentionally. Granted, I have heard that she has the best character arc in the series, but I always have chose Kaiden, so I wouldn't know. The big problem with the writing here is there is not one good part about Ashley at all. It is fine to make a character have red flags. I even recommend it. Flawed characters are the most interesting, but if a character is all flawed, then the viewer or player has no reason to even try to like them. It's a waste of time if they don't have a character arc. In this game at least, she doesn't have one. You must wait 2 whole games, and in the second game, she's barely there. The one outlier of this conversation that I love is when Ashley agrees to get along with aliens and says a saying about if Shep asks Ashley to kiss a Turian, she will ask which cheek. The one dialogue option I wish I chose was, what about me? It just seems like a funny ass fuck thing to say, making Shep like a fuckboy or something. Then right after we tell her that she shouldn't be xenophobic, then she proceeds to be xenophobic. Specifically talking about Liara. She believes Liara is lying about not associating herself with her mother. After telling her she isn't lying considering she seems bad at it, she then proceeds to ask about Liara's sex life. Huh? Dog. Ashley's just the most random character I've ever seen and heard. I mean, I guess the dude who sells alien jizz and High on Life is probably the most random, but you get what I mean. The next time we talk to Ashley is when she is on a call with her sister. Yeah, her sister says that Shep is cute. Now, I know where this whole Ashley plotline is going to go, and no thank you. But right after you talk to her, she immediately assumes that Shep is getting close to Liara. At this moment, I don't even think I engaged in any romance dialogue with Liara. So this whole timing of things makes no sense to me. I'm still gonna romance Liara though. And here's when we get to know more about Ashley and her background. She has a couple of siblings and was very close to her dad. She goes on this long as fuck tangent about how her sister was in a relationship with someone that was very pushy, and when it came to intercourse, her sister beat the hell out of the dude apparently. The range of dialogue options here are crazy. At one point you have the option to either choose no means no or boys will be boys. What the hell? Like I said, everything here is just random. Speaking of random, when you ask her about her dad, she says some normal thing that immediately goes to random again. She recites a literal poem. I have no idea if this poem is real or made up, but I was so lost here. I should have chose the option, what is this crap? As I said, there's nothing here that will get you to like Ashley. In the long run, yeah, Ashley will be cool, but keeping the original Mass Effect on its own, she is the worst character by far. And for things to get even more random, this whole conversation transitions to talking about God. I audibly laughed while playing through this. There's no way in hell the writers thought it would be a good idea to cram all of this into one dialogue sequence. It felt so inorganic, so forced, and boring. Anyways, we learn that Ashley is a believer in God. You have the option to either criticize her for it or be a good person and say it doesn't matter if she believes or not. Pretty straightforward. But after you say you don't really care what she believes in because all you are is her commanding officer, she's like, just your commanding officer? We will have to see about that. Like, dude, I am not gonna go after you, so chill. Anyways, the conversations with her continue when she asks if we have a thing for Liara. Bioware was trying to set up some sort of conflict here with Liara and Ashley, which they do later on, but I don't think it works, because even if you flat out decline Ashley or Liara, that fight will still happen regardless. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Afterwards, Ashley goes on this long tangent about her family. I guess her grandfather was the only person to surrender to the Turians during the First Contact War, so this is the reason that Ashley is so dismissive towards alien races and always wants to prove herself. She doesn't want to be blacklisted like her grandfather. She wants to be different and keep her family's name from sinking. This would all be great normally, but this is all told through exposition. With that, players are more likely not to care about Ashley or what she has to say. They're only going to focus on her bad traits, considering that was their first impression of her. Exposition isn't going to change that. A romance isn't going to change that. The only thing that will is most likely having a loyalty mission that has to do with her family. This doesn't happen though. As far as I saw, she has no loyalty mission in the game. Ashley's character was doomed to fail from the start, and they only got to fix it in the third game. Then after this conversation is just some more xenophobia from Ashley. The only other time we talk to her is when a confrontation happens between her and Liara, which I'll get to soon. Overall, Ashley's character, in my opinion, was poorly written. She has no good qualities about herself. Her xenophobia wasn't justified even with the explanation she gave. She gets mad when you let her know you have feelings for Liara, and she has extremely long exposition dumps that are so damn random. It honestly feels like they put her character together in like 1 month and called it a day. If I were to give a critique on this, I would want to delve deeper into her xenophobia. Maybe include a loyalty mission that deals with this, and after you could possibly change her mind about things. You know, actually have a character arc here. Once you do that, she may be a likable character. Regardless, Ashley is the worst crew member by far here, no doubt. Liara is a character that has her bright spots but also has a lot of dull moments. She's extremely polite, very nice and kind and smart, but she lacks common social skills. Just like me, she sometimes can't tell if something is sarcasm or not. She can be naive at times, and most of her dialogue has to do with her race. This is fun and is very interesting. I just wish we learned a lot more about her personality in the game. I mean, you do so in Mass Effect 2 and 3, but having them here as well would have been great considering that is her introduction. Regardless, we formally talked to Liara right after we saved her from the excavation site. She states that most of her time spent is usually on digs that uncover things that are important, mostly connecting to the Protheans. It appears the Asari people work a lot and make it their entire personality. You could say the same about the Quarians, but with them, things are more complicated considering they have no home planet, and they're forced to work endlessly to keep their flotilla going. I guess it makes sense considering Asari live for 1,000 years, so they have the time to work a lot. After asking Liara if it gets lonely working alone, a lot of the time she explains that being alone is something that she wants. This makes sense because her social skills are complete ass. Plus, I can relate to it. Anytime you can relate to a character, it makes them 10 times better, just like in real life. If you relate to someone, you're going to like them a lot more. So, Liara is better than Garrus and Ashley at this moment. And to go further, Liara explains that the reason she is so reserved when it comes to people is because her mother was a matriarch. Matriarchs are considered leaders for their people. Liara, living in her mother's shadow, wanted the opposite. She would rather dig up secrets of the past and lead people to a better future. It makes perfect sense in my mind, and I love it. Right after, she mentions that since she is so interested in the Protheans, when Shep was marked by the beacon, that made Liara fascinated with Shep. When you respond by questioning her, she gets all defensive and acts like she isn't interested in Shep that way. This is a very cute exchange that really emphasizes how bad at communicating she is, and it was at this point that I understood I was going to choose her as my romance option. Going forward, here's where we can find out more about the Asari race. The Asari was the first race to discover the Citadel after the last Reaper wave. They are also the diplomatic side to everything, just as the Turians are military might and the Solarians are scientists. I guess humans are the middle ground to literally everything. The most interesting thing about them, though, is that they are monogendered, meaning there is no male or female in the Asari species. Their bodily makeup is feminine, though. This is a very interesting way to make this race different from the rest. It amplifies the world building and makes everything feel original in nature. To add on to this, the Asari mating ritual is different than the rest. When they mate, they connect their minds with their significant other. They literally fuse themselves within another person and understand everything the other person went through and vice versa, which is dope. The weird thing is, though, their race believes that mating within their own brings nothing new to the table. They shame those that are pure blood, which is exactly what Liara is. In Liara's case, you never encounter anyone that points this out in the game or any other form from what I've seen. I think the devs should have at least put something in the game that corresponds with this. That way, this information that Liara gives seems significant. Otherwise, it just feels like useless information. But I mean, I understand all Asari kind of look the same, and you can't tell if someone's a pureblood or not. So, going off the tangent, Asari believe mating with another race will bring the good traits from that other race to their offspring, making the Asari smarter, stronger, and everything in between. Considering Liara's mother mated within her own race, which is frowned upon, Liara doesn't know her father. Most likely, he fled because of the very reason I mentioned. I like this. It makes you feel sorry for Liara. It makes you want to get close to her. I find the backstory of her character, it was a lot more well thought out than the rest of the crew, maybe besides Wrex. Wrex is just a different breed of character. At least for this initial dialogue encounter, it was great with Liara. You found out about her personality, although it wasn't as much as I hoped. You found out interesting information about her race. You understand more about why she is bad at talking to people and so forth. It's a far cry from Ashley, who blurts out racism the first time you talk with her. Also, Liara doesn't spout poem nonsense for no reason whatsoever, which is a huge plus. To make things even better, the next time you talk to Liara is when the romance dialogue starts to kick in. She states that we have talked a lot about her. She wants to know more about us, about Shepard. But before that, she proceeds to tell us how much humanity sucks ass. This sounds about right, pretty much about how humans are rushed, high-strung, extremely motivated to the point where we will harm people for selfish reasons. You know the drill. Now that I think about it, humanity in this game seems like complete assholes, like the frat boys of the universe. Anyways, Shep says this is the case because humans only live for about 100 years. Maybe a little over. We're forced to do things quickly or else it will be too late to do so. But this is when Liara starts to get all flirty with us. I guess she looked into her past without asking and found out about our backstory and tells us it was admirable. Everything Liara says is just cute. I don't want to say that she's quirky because that's kind of cringe, but the way the writers built her character was well thought out. I just wish they put this amount of effort into all of the characters on the Normandy. They half-assed Ashley's character for what feels like it was on purpose. Garrus is just mid in the game, and I will get to everyone else later. Regardless, this is when Liara expresses her feelings for Shep, in which you can question her feelings on if she's actually interested in you or she's interested in you because of the beacon. I find this question a good one to ask in all honesty. It makes sense because Liara is obsessed with the Protheans and you have only been with her for about like 2 days. But suddenly she asks if we have a thing for Ashley. This part threw me off, and I mentioned this before. I never once expressed interest in Ashley through dialogue options. There should be no reason to ask this question. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't want there to be a forced confrontation if there shouldn't be. It is not necessary. They should have added different outcomes corresponding with if you chose Liara only, Ashley only, or both. Go the Witcher 3 route in this case. It would have made things a lot easier. But I tell Liara that I'm interested in her, which causes Liara to think everything over considering she thinks we have nothing in common. My Shep does the frat boy option and says that things don't have to make sense, things just happen, which now looking back doesn't sound like a good response and I should have chosen a different one. There is more to Liara's character after a certain mission, so I'll have to hold off until that is complete. Otherwise, at this moment, Liara is my favorite character in this game. Her cute moments are welcome and genuinely made me laugh at times. Learning about Asari culture was interesting and I wanted to know more. Her writing was done well and the voice actor did an amazing job, emphasizing a naive young Asari. Everything made sense about Liara and I appreciate that. Wrex is quite a character in this game. This man deals in absolutes majority of the time, he doesn't take shit from nobody, is extremely blunt, is bred for war, and is very protective of his race, mostly due to the genophage. Speaking of, that is the first thing we talk about when we approach Wrex. So what is the genophage? The genophage was a disease created by the Solarians in order to slow down the breeding of the Krogan. The Krogan were creating offspring at such a rapid pace that if it were to go on any further, it would be a risk to the rest of the galaxy, considering the Krogan race are extremely violent and war hungry. This shit is kind of horrible to think to fix the issue, according to the Solarians, was to cause mass genocide. It's fucked. I side with Wrex here. Regardless of the risks involved, the Solarians had no place to do what they did. But Wrex gives a good insight into what flaws the Krogan have. Sure, the genophage sucks, but in Rex's words, it isn't what's killing them. The Krogan are very spread out. They go to new worlds, find new jobs, homes, contracts, and whatever. This causes Krogan to not care about saving their own world. They have given up on finding a cure. They were bred for war, not science. They have no other way to fix things than just forget about it and move on with their life. It's pretty sad. Now I think the Krogan race rivals the Asari for my favorite in the series. Next time we talk to Wrex, it has to do with Saren. I guess he met with Saren before and he didn't tell us. I mean, it wasn't important to mention anyway, considering Wrex had no idea it was Saren until all the people that he was with turned up dead in a couple days. And the fact that he's with us now and knows who Saren is though. Why is this important to mention? This conversation showed who Wrex truly is. He's just a normal merc trying to make a living. He mentions the job he had when he encountered Saren. He was just loading bodies for extra credits, hoping to get some valuables. This shows that Wrex has a small moral compass. He's willing to do whatever it takes in order to get his contract done and get paid. A cold-blooded merc. This makes me love his character. He comes off as old and wise, and you can tell that he's been through some shit mentally and physically. Just wants to have enough credits to get by. But even after all of that, he still wants to go on this mission with Shep in order to get Saren. A real homie. I also love how Wrex talks so little. I mean, he talks just like anyone else on the ship, but he doesn't go on these long as fuck sequences of exposition. He says what he wants to say and doesn't sugarcoat it. For example, when I ask him why he became a merc, he says,
"Why did you become a mercenary?"
Lots of reasons.
And that's it. It helps even more that it fits his personality. This isn't done for the purpose of keeping conversations little. This was done to complement the character. But after pressing further on why he never stayed on his own planet to help out with the genophage, he says that he was betrayed by a man named Jared. I love how Krogan have these names like Wrex and Grunt. Then there's this fucker named Jared. Anyways, Jared was your typical radical Krogan who wanted to go to war with those involved with the genophage. Wrex didn't want that, considering they didn't have the numbers because of that genophage, and war would just speed up the process. When Wrex told people to work on breeding rather than preparing for war, Jared asked to meet at a sacred burial that prohibits violence. Things didn't go well, so Jared gave the signal to jump Wrex, disregarding the rules pretty much. The plot twist is, after Wrex got jumped, he killed Jared and fled. And Jared was Rex's dad. Like I said, Wrex has been through some shit, and it clearly shows with his demeanor and look. He states this is the main reason why he doesn't want to go back home. He doesn't want to face his past. Why are these last two characters so much better writing-wise than the others? I mean, Garrus is okay, but compared to Liara and Wrex, damn. But along with Garrus, Wrex also has a loyalty mission that's extremely important to the story. I made the mistake the first go around of this game by not doing his side quest, and I never regretted something so much. Our objective is to pretty much retrieve an important set of battle armor for Wrex. I mean, this side mission was okay. Calling it a side mission is being generous. It was more of a clear this base out, unlock this thing, get the armor mission complete. I do wish they put more thought into the loyalty quests. They did so in the second game, but it would be extremely beneficial here. After you get the armor, Wrex only says he's starting to like you, and that's it. So it's safe to say I was disappointed. Though, that really is the only disappointing thing about Wrex. Most of the time, he's just a joy to hear dialogue from. Next time we talk to him, he expresses how much of an ass this Volus is.
I remember one time I was hired by a Volus diplomat. What an ass.
Every time this guy talks, I either chuckle or I want to know more about what he's talking about. Regardless, this is the last time we talked to him. He tells a story about how he was hired to kill this Asari commando. This same Asari was someone he met when the two were both hired to take out the same target. In the act of hunting this person down, they became good friends. When Wrex told the commando about the contract he agreed to, he insisted that she pick the place they would fight, to make this interesting and fun, I suppose. So she chose a space station. To keep a long story short, they pretty much took out the entire station. It blew up. Thing is, no one died that day. The commando and Wrex both lived, and since Wrex didn't complete the contract, he told the truth to the Volus, in which the Volus hired him to be his bodyguard until his eventual death. Just the little stories like these make me love Mass Effect. It is similar to when you were younger and your grandpa would tell you tales of what he did when he was a kid. It's just simple stories that get you invested in a character, and it's done right. And you can actually feel yourself getting closer with Wrex directly after you retrieve his armor. It was like there was a flip in his personality for the better. And in my opinion, Wrex is the best character in the game. His backstory is interesting. He doesn't talk with long exposition dumps. He gets right to the point and says what's on his mind. You must work for him to like you. All these things add great character depth, and over time you will find yourself loving this character. Not to mention having him in your party will cause some funny dialogue to play. Wrex is the homie and deserves to be on the very top of this list. Kaiden is the most boring character in your crew. I am not going to sugarcoat it. He doesn't give much personality at all. The only things you really understand about him are his past regarding biotic implants in a company called Conadix. The first time we talk to him, it has to do with this said biotic implants. I guess as a kid, he was put into this brain camp so higher ups can compile understanding of biotic implants. He insinuates that this was by force, but I'm not entirely sure. Let me know in the comments. Anyways, he goes on to say that when he was at the station dedicated to this biotic research led by Conadix did whatever they could to keep the station away from the public. As I mentioned before, none of this is interesting to me. It's all boring exposition that gives no real depth to Kaiden other than telling us his past. And right after, you get to talk about a girl he used to like. Again, shit that isn't important and doesn't give you any real depth to Kaiden. And in all honesty, there was so much exposition going on with Kaiden that you have no real understanding of what is actually being said. You just hear the lore jargon constantly. When you hear one lore bit, you'll forget what was said in the previous sentence. It isn't good. It feels like a jumbled mess that was put together quickly with no real thought behind it. For comparison, I would rather have a character with a horrible personality like Ashley than a boring as fuck character like Kaiden. And talking with Kaiden again, we understand that he has an L2 biotic chip implant that has a tendency to have a lot of side effects behind it, like extreme migraines. Interesting, right? No. Kaiden gives the explanation that if he switched to an L3 chip, he would of course lose the side effects, but he would also lose some abilities. Anyways, going away from the implants, Kaiden mentions that the program he was in was headed by Turians right after the war. You can understand the problems that this would cause with humanity if they found out about what was happening at Conadix. And I will admit, this was the most interesting thing when it comes to Kaiden, though I don't care as much as the rest of the crew. It just feels like a forced conversation that I have to get through. At least this time it was less of a slog. I guess the person that was teaching future biotics goes by the name of Virmire? I have no idea how to pronounce it. He was a Turian mercenary that essentially tortured the subjects. But want to know the most infuriating thing? Kaiden then right after says that he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Like, dude, I understand that it may be hard to talk about, but why did you bring up all of this backstory then? It feels like Bioware had no idea where to cut off the subject, so they just decided to do it at a random point when the character is most interested. I was irritated to say the least. High-key didn't want to talk to Kaiden until I absolutely needed to for this analysis. When we encounter him again, we finally pick back up the conversation about his time with the jackass Turian at Conadix. To keep everything short, the girl wanted some water and grabbed a glass like a normal person, but since she didn't use her biotic abilities, she got her arm broke by Virmire. Kaiden got mad and stood up for her, but he got his shit clapped. Kaiden had enough and kicked the shit out of the dude and offed him. I understand how this can be a traumatic experience, and I'm not trying to be an asshole when I say this. The way the conversation is set up, delivered, and so forth was boring. Just like everything else. There was no real emotion behind Kaiden's voice. Unlike Wrex, where he used his personality to tell his stories with little to nothing said, Kaiden delivers everything like he's narrating a book. This can somewhat be said for Liara as well. It comes off as dull and uninspiring. It leads me to not want to talk to this guy. But whatever, I guess. This is where I'm stuck with the rankings. Ashley is an ass who is racist and spouts nonsense at the most random times. Kaiden is just outright boring. So who's better? I don't know. They're equal, I guess, in terms of genuinely liking someone. I would rather hang around a boring person than someone I hate. In terms of writing, I would rather have an insufferable character than a boring one. So with this in mind, they kind of offset each other. They both suck, and it's a shame that the only two humans that are squad members are the worst. Tali, in terms of the entire series, she's my favorite squad mate. When it comes to this game alone, she's decent. She herself says that everything on the ship is foreign to her, which gives great insight. She can be shy at times, but most of the interesting facts about her come from her race and background, such as the flotilla, the origins of the Geth, how her government governs, and so forth. She also gets super nerdy when it comes to the Normandy and how it operates. It's cute in its own way. Kind of the same as what my girlfriend says when I nerd out about video games to her. Actually, this is the first thing that is talked about when you encounter Tali on the Normandy. She gets excited at the fact that humans are very technologically advanced and have one of the most high-tech ships on the Citadel. So why exactly is Tali so interested in ships? It's because Quarians grew up on ships. Quarians live on what is called the migrant fleet. Considering they were exiled from their own planet by the Geth, they were forced to just float around in space. This means they're very isolated from the rest of the races in the galaxy. It means that ships are very valuable to the Quarian race, which is interesting and different. I love how the different races in this game have a certain interesting trait about them. Asari have a very different breeding process and are monogendered. Krogan have the genophage going on. Turians are constantly stuck in the stereotype of war and law enforcement. Quarians are extremely isolated. And then, well, we have humans. They really have nothing interesting going on. Maybe that's why Ashley and Kaiden suck ass. To go further, Tali is on what is called a pilgrimage. Essentially, this is when a person on the flotilla goes on an adventure on their own to understand the world around them. They're expected to come back with something useful, whether that be knowledge or materials. Tali also mentions there are times where certain Quarians never come back home. Either they found their place in the world or they simply died. These things that the Quarians come back with are used to maintain their ships so they can stay floating, considering they have been flying for about 300 years. This almost seems religious in nature, I guess. It's a blend of religion and government would, in today's age, would not bode well, but this is what makes the Quarians unique, and I love it. I love Tali and her viewpoint on things, always wanting to learn more about the world around her, the ship itself, about Shepard, about the crew. There's always something interesting going on with her. Anyways, this is when the Geth and their origins get brought up. As I've said before, the Quarians were the ones that created them to begin with. At first, their intelligence was limited to VI, then later evolved to an AI robot who could do a multitude of complex things. What made things unstable was that they were all linked to a central network where Geth would have one mind simultaneously. This eventually caused Geth to have awareness of their enslavement. They wanted freedom and believed themselves to be their own race. So what did the Quarians do? They got scared and did the fucked up thing by shutting them down, which then led to war. Kind of weird how that works out, huh? If you press Tali on this further, if your ship takes the opposite stance and critiques the Quarians' response, she'll get extremely defensive, which in my eyes proves that she knows that her race was in the wrong. If you simply are not willing to listen to any criticism and just blatantly try to defend yourself, you're projecting. This means there is something in you that knows the response was wrong, but you're trying to justify it because, well, you did the bad thing and you don't see yourself as a bad person. I'm not saying Tali's a bad person. She's the opposite, as you could see in later games. All I'm saying is the Quarians themselves are bad people, or rather the decision making is outstandingly bad. Think about it. They created a race that just wanted to be treated fairly. In response, you shut them down or kill them. This leads to war and exile from your own planet. The Quarians are not good when it comes to decision making. Some may take my criticism of the Quarians as bad writing. Trust me, it's far from that. I love the writing and background of the Quarians. I've never been this invested in lore before. The next time Shep talks with Tali is when she feels homesick, which honestly makes sense. She explains how even though the crew is great to her, she feels out of place. The Normandy runs quietly, the crew is tight-knit and relatively small, no one really talks that much on the ship. All of this is the complete opposite of Flotilla. It just makes Tali feel so innocent and it's sad. She isn't used to this much action, tech, and so forth. It really makes the player want to be patient with this character. Anyways, Tali also mentions that considering she's still on her pilgrimage, she will need to bring something back to the flotilla once our mission with Saren is over. And this is very important to her considering she reveals that her father is one of the higher-ups on the flotilla. She wants to make an impression, so to speak. To summarize, the Quarian government, they essentially have a democracy of a few elected officials to oversee the remaining Quarians on the ships. This is one thing I wish the other races talked about more. We know the Krogan have tribes, but they never go into depth on how that works. Turians never mention what their government is, same with Asari and Solarians. This downside to all the other races makes me appreciate the Quarians even more. Their backstory is a lot more fleshed out, to say the least. Going back to the favor Tali asks, I don't think I ever encountered the mission in this game. She says that we would do so after we take out Saren, but after the game ends, I don't think you can tackle the rest of the side missions. I'm not sure if this was a cut mission or I'm being stupid or something else, so I was a tad disappointed. Overall, I love Tali. She has the most fleshed out backstory regarding her race, she's cute in her own way, cares deeply about the crew, and is overall a good person, unlike racist over here. With that being said, at least in this game, I don't think she's the best character here. Wrex has a more interesting personality, and Liara has a romance option that deepens the connection with her character. So I think Tali's in the middle of the road. If she had a romance option in this game specifically, she would have been above Liara. Going back to the story, the next order of business is to do an important side quest that nets you an extra skill so you can level up in, or rather replace a skill with a better one depending on your playstyle. A homie named Admiral Hackett tasks us with clearing out a settlement on the moon that is inhabited by a rogue VI that wants to take out everything on sight. Seems like a decent mission, right? Well, no, you have to clear out 3 outposts that look the exact same. The only variation between the two is the obstacles involved in preventing you from destroying these VI machine things. So you must do this 3 times in total. In between each one, you have to get into the Mako, drive to the next one, and repeat the process. It's so uninspiring and boring, and not to mention, the moon just looks dull. I understand it's the moon, but this is supposed to be way in the future. The least Bioware could have done was put a still PNG backdrop in the background showing a dense city or something. Here, you also fight some uninspiring enemies. I thought we were supposed to fight some sort of VI. Instead, you only destroy some generators and take out some flying robots. The good part about this place is getting the specialization class though. I have the option of either choosing Shock Trooper or Nemesis. Shock Trooper nets you more health, damage protection, improves adrenaline, and the barrier ability. Nemesis is pretty much a biotic only specialization, considering I use guns most of the time and I'm a slut for damage output. I chose Shock Trooper, plus the extra health would be good, even though I don't need it. Anyways, after this side mission was when I really started to put focus into adding upgrades to my weapons as well as getting the Spectre supply of guns. Trust me, this changes the game fundamentally and I wish I had done it sooner. Regardless, finally when we get to the planet of Noveria to go after Matriarch Benezia, though it's clear that the people who are here don't want us on the planet. As we approach the guards at the door, they seem extremely pissy. Since I'm someone that doesn't take disrespect lightly, I chose the options to be a dick back. This is the part that makes me love Wrex as a character. Whenever you're a dick to someone for the right reasons and they say something back, this homie will have your back no matter what and will talk shit for you. And it feels so nice to have this person get chewed out by the superior. I love it.
Don't try it.
So here's when we need to investigate where in the hell the matriarch is. But we find out that she reached a place called Peak 15, but it's closed off because of the weather conditions, I guess. Considering they clearly don't want us here, why would they care if we travel to the hazardous conditions? Maybe they just want to keep an extra eye on us? I have no idea. But this brings us to a dude named Ananias. He is one of the higher ups at the facility, and it's clear he's hiding something and doesn't want us here. Other than a secret he's hiding, he tells us that Saren was a major influencer within the corporation. Part of me wants to tear the council a new one, considering if they looked deeper into what he was doing, they would have understood that he does reckless things that give bad press of the Citadel. So why wouldn't they revoke his Spectre status sooner? The argument of Spectres having ultimate authority just seems like bullshit to me. It is only a title used to bypass plot holes that don't make sense, just like this instance. Any sane person would understand while reviewing what Saren has done, would understand that he probably shouldn't be a Spectre, but because he is a Spectre, he just gets away with it. Honestly, no wonder they did away with the importance of a Spectre in the next 2 games. Anyways, as you can imagine, the Solarian won't do anything for us, so we must go to someone else, specifically a Turian. And as you might expect, you have to finish another objective in order to even get to Peak 15. Considering we already know the Solarian we met is most likely dirty, this Turian proves this point. I guess the Solarian locked the Turian out of his office because he had evidence that the Solarian was getting bribe money. The shitty part is, about this mission, you don't really get any backstory. You don't get to find out why he was doing what he did. He is just greedy. This is fine and realistic, but I want more here. And before we even get to this dude's office, this whole facility is a fucking nightmare to walk around. Shepard sprints at a snail's pace and the layout is confusing as hell. I wish the minimap was more helpful, and I also wish there was less elevators here. Though, when we get to the office, there are some hired guns already there looking for evidence. You once again have the option of being a good boy or bad boy. I could only choose good boy, so what I don't understand is the good boy option has the guard leave without a fight, but a fight still goes on. Then what was the point of the other chick walking away? I would have offed her if I knew this was the outcome. Maybe y'all know more than I do, but I was confused as to why we still had to fight these guys. Maybe she didn't want to fight in particular because she was too scared. Anyway, moving on. We fight the soldiers here, take the evidence, and then run into that one Karen when we first landed on Noveria. She's like, you know what we do to cop killers on my world? And I pretty much said, hey, I got a mission to complete. And then I unloaded. This dialogue exchange was just funny for no reason. But the chick we were talking to earlier outs herself and says she's pretty much the FBI of Noveria and wants us to convince the Turian to testify in court for the Solarian to pay for his crimes. And I'm down for some justice, so sure. Though when you talk to him, he hesitates. I don't understand this considering we have literal evidence that the Solarian was doing some shady shit. Mix that with the Turian's word, boom, case closed. So why wouldn't you testify? It all seems weird to me that you have to convince this dude. Whenever we pick the good guy option, the Solarian gets locked up and we make our way to peak 15. But the whole ride up there was kind of the same as the Liara mission, as well as the Thorian mission. It all involves taking the Mako. I just wish there was at least one mission that didn't involve this damn thing. There was absolutely no reason to include it here. Or in the game for that matter. Seriously, please tell me the reason. It isn't fun to drive. The drive is boring, and the enemies you have to take out are weak as hell to this thing. I just do not like it, and I don't think people liked it back when it came out. But the interior level is a different story, very similar to the introduction of the Flood in Halo. We get to see the Arachni, a race of bug-like creatures. At first glance, these guys can be terrifying. But just looking at it right now, Bioware could have made these guys a lot scarier. Maybe they just wanted to have more people play this game and not get worried about scaring off players. So it would have been cool to have this place be a horror level, but instead, this turns into a do this and do that level. But what do I mean by that? Well, we meet this VI who tells us that this entire facility is pretty much fucked at the moment. We have to fix the landlines that are guarded by the enemies, then you have to fix the reactor guarded by enemies. It's essentially set in stone objectives that don't mean anything other than adding game time. That is its sole purpose, which I have a problem with. You can't just add meaningless objectives to a game. If you have these set objectives, at least have interesting plot points to go along with it. Here it isn't interesting. You don't get to understand the secrets behind the Arachni during this section. The VI simply says, I don't remember anything after my shutdown. Or it's revealed in text, which, I mean, that's kind of like a problem within myself, but whatever, we're gonna move on. This takes us to the hot labs where we meet with some survivors. They have been battling these Arachni for a solid minute. Anyways, mid-conversation, the Arachni come out of nowhere to battle us, but it wasn't that big of a deal. But while exploring, I came across the rest of the survivors here. Silly thing though, if you decrypt a certain door, keep in mind it gives you a warning. Everyone will come after you to try and kill you, and I have no idea why this is the case. I never came across anything that says why, it just happens, and I was surprised. I was going to reload the previous save after, but you don't get any renegade points from it, so I just went with it. Eventually, we do make it to Mommy Benezia, and she pretty much goes on this tangent about having power and then transitions to talking about the Arachni Queen. Pretty much just nonsense. Then she's like, have fun going up against sorry commandos. Bitch, okay? So we mow them down super easily because at this point my ship is just overpowered. There's even a point where she runs out of Asari commandos and just sends Geth. I found this so funny because she hyped up the commandos so much only for them to get their shit rocked. Going back to Benezia, after praising Saren for his light, I guess, says that Saren is pretty much God. When you call her out, she all of a sudden changes her mind. She uses the excuse of the fighting the indoctrination off, but this happens so suddenly to where I still don't believe her till this day. Even if she told the truth through and through, it makes sense considering she's an Asari, which are one of the most intelligent species in the galaxy, and she's also a matriarch, but it still feels so weird acting-wise. I don't know if this was the direction in which was told to the voice actor, or if it was the voice actor doing this. It was bad. It was really bad. Regardless, Benezia was here to find out where the Mu relay is. I guess the relay went off course because the star went supernova, so you know the usual. In order to find the Mu relay, Benezia tortured the Arachni Queen because I guess she knows where it is, and she gives us the information on some USB drive. This whole thing was super confusing to me, at least. This causes us to talk to the Arachni Queen ourselves after, and we have the option to either take out the Arachni Queen and doom her species, or like not commit genocide. I chose not to commit the genocide simply because I'm not a fan of it. It's kind of a dick move. But we brief the council, and once that is over, we get confronted by Liara and Ashley. Both ask that we need to choose one or the other. Bye, Ashley. Like I said before, I never even gave Ashley an indication that I liked her. She just assumed, so fuck that. And after this, I never talked to Ashley willingly again. She is that insufferable. If you make a character this dislikable, is that even a word? Dislikable? If you make a character this dislikable intentionally, it's a huge con. But this is when we visit Liara in her quarters because she says this.
You know where to find me if you want to have a more private conversation.
But instead, we talked about her dead mother. Okay, this makes me sound like a douche. I promise I'm not. This is the time for comfort for Liara. She claims that she didn't care about Benezia, but you can tell by her voice and mannerisms that this isn't the case. She loved her mom even though she didn't have much time with her. Also, the last words her mother said mean something to Liara. You can't help but to feel bad for her. It was her only family, for Christ's sakes. But after this is when Liara alludes to wanting to do the deed with Shep. It was such an abrupt transition, I have to admit. But when Shep is blunt asks if this is really what she's alluding to, she cutely freaks out and says that this is why she's been reserved, simply because the mating ritual for Asari has a deeper connection than other races. Considering we've only met Liara like a couple of days ago in-game, this feels so weird and doesn't seem like she's being reserved. If they would have saved this romance option until the second or third game, I think it would have been a better payoff. It is like what they did with Tali, and it worked wonders. But we promised Liara that we will bang after we deal with Saren. I guess that's the middle ground here. But now it's time for Virmire. Virmire is a lot better than the rest of the main missions in the game. I guess the very last mission is the best, but that's besides the point. The only shitty part about this mission is again the Mako section. But having it at the beginning of the mission was a good decision in my opinion. Get the shitty part out of the way quick, then get the good stuff. And after this, we get to the Solarian recon base that initially asked for reinforcements to be sent to them, but the transmission was cut off. They tell us that this planet houses Saren's base of operations along with a research facility. But this is when the bad news kicks in. Saren has been secretly breeding an army of Krogan. He's discovered a cure to the genophage. And as you can expect, Wrex gets all hyped about this and is mad at the fact that we're fighting Saren instead of siding with him. Here's when the important side quest kicks in. If he did not do it, Wrex will die from Shep shooting him after a heated argument. If he did this side quest, he would understand Shep and won't be offed. I love this in games. Decision making in general should be something games should often adopt. The consequences that go along with doing something adds replayability in a sense. What would the story be like if this person lived? What if they died? Having those questions is good and will warrant second playthroughs. But this brings us to the meat of the mission. We make a deal with the Solarians to split into teams. We have the choice on taking Ashley or Kaiden with us while the other leads one of the other fire teams. I chose Kaiden to go with the other team mostly because I trust him to lead a group better than Bucktooth over here. Keep in mind, everyone has been ramping this mission up to be a suicide mission. The chances of us dying is way higher than living. Any smart person is going to understand that at least one person is not gonna make it out here. I'm not saying this because it's obvious, mostly because of hindsight and my knowledge of writing. This is blatant foreshadowing. But this goes into probably one of the best combat sequences in the game. It feels like a race against the clock, battling the Geth non-stop with only little sections to breathe. It really feels like you're on a suicide mission. This would be 10 times better if they made the level a tad bit more difficult. Maybe less copy and pasted elements would have been nice, but considering this is an old ass game with rusty mechanics, this was fun. I was thoroughly enjoying just blasting through Geth here. And to make the level even better, here's where you find the evidence of indoctrination with live test subjects. Earlier when we were talking to the Solarians, they mentioned they had a bigger team, but they either died or was captured. These men are the captured ones. It's a fucked situation and makes things much darker. The Solarian even mentions that Saren is oblivious to the effects of indoctrination. Possibly he's being indoctrinated as well. All of these questions are just good to have. But we learn even more about indoctrination from an Asari scientist that was forced to work here, but she was also willing to do so. It is very weird and even Shep is confused by this. This is when we finally understand where the indoctrination is coming from. Sovereign. In other words, Reapers have the ability to mind control, which will be a staple throughout the series, though admittedly it gets less and less mentioned throughout the series. You have the option not to let this Asari go, or you can let her go. Though when I let her go, Shep just tells her to start running. Like, homie, we're setting off a damn nuke on the planet and you're expecting her to run? I'm not sure this should count as Paragon. She's gonna die regardless. But before that, she was nice enough to let us have access to Saren's office. I'm not sure what to call it. Office, hideout, I don't know. Here you can find another beacon as well as a console that you can interact with. The beacon only gives Shep a mini seizure. The console is where all the meat is. This is when we actually talk to Sovereign. He states that he is the pinnacle of evolution and that their very existence that other races can't comprehend. He isn't wrong. Sovereign states that a cycle happens every 50,000 years, a cleansing of the galaxy. He also states that the Citadel, the mass relays, they were not created by the Protheans, but by them, the Reapers. This changes everything. When you think about it, and is later confirmed, this means that the Reapers have access to everything in the galaxy. Nothing is safe from them. This heightens the stakes to extreme lengths, a classic saving the galaxy tale that only Mass Effect has the ability to pull off well. Actually, I take that back. Halo can do it well. Just something about this plotline speaks to my soul, and only the next 2 in the series can rival it. After this, we must fight through waves of enemies in order to get to the location to place the nuke. When doing so, Kaiden radios in and says that he's pinned down. So we have to save him, but there's a choice involved. When you get to Kaiden's location, Ashley gets pinned down. You have to choose to either save Kaiden or Ashley. Normally I would choose to save Kaiden all the way, but since I did that in my last playthrough, I chose to keep Ashley. The part I hate about this choice is, it's an easy one to make. Normal people would probably choose to save Kaiden because he isn't a racist asshole. He wasn't specifically written to be insufferable. It's like the devs wanted you to choose Kaiden all the way, like it was canon. I'm just glad this wasn't Tali, Garrus, or Liara. If that was the case, I would have been heated. When we get back to the bomb is when we finally encounter Saren. Here he gives us an excuse on why he's helping the Reapers. In his eyes, destruction is inevitable whether we fight or not. He believes that if we help the Reapers with their goal, there may be a chance that they will spare some of us. All his faith relies on a what if. This may sound stupid as fuck, right? What makes this more interesting and not stupid is the fact that this guy's already indoctrinated. He doesn't even know it. There is even a dialogue option that you can choose to convince him to come back. Though he doesn't do so, doubt does get planted in his mind. This is the right way to make dialogue options matter. It feels natural to plant doubt instead of immediately changing someone's mind. Though I will say the confrontation that happens with Saren after sucks. We'll get to that later. But after you shoot at Saren until his health is low and he flies away, and right after, we have to hurry and save Ashley before the nuke goes off, which ends our time on Virmire, and Kaiden passes away. But when we're on the ship, we only get a few sentences from Ashley about Kaiden. Literally no one else in the squad talks about him, which feels inauthentic. I mean, whatever. After, we then exchanged our vision from the beacon with Liara. She claims that this beacon was a distress signal from the Protheans that the Reapers were coming, though this distress signal was too late. But I guess Liara recognizes the images and claims that they're from Ilos. I have no idea how she knows where this is. It just happened out of nowhere. It feels like a coincidence. But then again, there may have probably been copious amounts of coincidences in this game that I haven't noticed, so it doesn't matter anymore. Regardless, before we even go to Ilos, we must relay our findings to the council in person since they requested us. The shitty part is, and what makes me irritated with the council, is that no matter what you say or do, they will deny our case for the Reapers being present and won't let Shep travel to Ilos. And of course, Udina's here agreeing with everything the council's saying and decides to ground the Normandy, meaning we can't go anywhere. I mean, I guess just fuck Shepard, you know, the person who probably knows more than anyone else about Saren and the Reapers. At least we have Liara over here to give us a pep talk, although those can come off as cringe to some people. To me at least, I find it heartwarming. It just shows the extreme care that Liara has for Shepard. I mean, I guess a lot of it is also the fact that the galaxy may be in immense danger, and Shep is quite literally the only one who can stop it. So how do we solve this problem of the Normandy being grounded? We talked to the homie Anderson since he's the only fucking sane person that is part of the Alliance. We can either have Anderson go into the Citadel control center and unlock the Normandy that way, which is pretty dangerous and heavily guarded. The other way is for Anderson to sneak into Udina's office and release the Normandy that way. The problem is, Udina might be in there. Well, I chose Anderson to go into Udina's office because of this.
What are you doing here? I didn't send...
I'm not sure if the other option has any consequences on a bigger scale. If there isn't, I feel like that would have been a missed opportunity, though I can't comment on this because I've never chosen the other option, but this allows us to go to Ilos without any trouble. But here's the juicy stuff. This is the part when Liara claims she's ready to, you know. I'm gonna be honest, this thing was very cringe and I couldn't bring myself to watch it. Even if I was allowed to show you guys this, I feel like it would just be weird for me to analyze this scene. So we're gonna move on. At least it wasn't Ashley. On Ilos, we have to battle through copious amounts of Geth, as you can expect. Here though, the architecture around everything is so cool and ancient looking. It feels like you were exploring something worth exploring. I don't know, the one thing I don't like though is the number of elevators here. I understand the tech back then wasn't that good and they needed more load times, and the next gen consoles helps this out tremendously. Still, it just kind of sucks. Also, I got stuck on where to go a lot here, and since the minimap doesn't help, I always have to go to the menus and look there. It's really tedious. Then once again, we have a Mako section that only goes in a straight line, just like the one where we had to investigate Exogeny. It's super boring and there was no reason to put it here. Going past the things we already know, we get to learn some things we don't know. we get to talk to a working, slightly damaged Prothean VI named Vigil. He tells us that the Citadel is actually a trap. This is really a mass relay for the Reapers to pour through when the time has come to cleanse the galaxy. And the reason no one knew about this was because of the Keepers. They were created by the Reapers to not only maintain the Citadel for future races, but to also activate the Citadel as a relay. I will say all of this is quite interesting and a very good plot twist to include. If the Citadel is taken out, that means peace between races is taken out. And this means a united front against the Reapers is no longer an option. I have to admit, Bioware thought this through pretty well, and I have to commend them for that. Prodding deeper because Liara said so, we also find out that this facility housed a whole slew of Prothean scientists and put them in cryosleep. The reason being because they wanted to hide from the Reapers. The VI we were talking to was ensuring the Protheans' life, but as time passed, power they had started to decrease. This meant that the VI had to end non-essential lives. Safe to say that this shit is dark and sad. The fact that they had to end their lives to save people to pass on the information to the next generation that had to fight off the Reapers, yikes. I love this. Knowing that the Citadel is a mass relay itself and that there's a relay that connects to it from Ilos, we take our Mako, drive it right through the relay, and take the fight to the Citadel, where we can see that Saren and his Geth army are already there, along with Sovereign making his way through the Citadel and landing on a thing. I'm not sure what he's doing there, but I'm pretty sure it's bad. The coolest thing about this section though is the combat that happens outside of the Citadel. The sound effects are muffled, the ambience is great, and it feels like you're doing the impossible. Though there was one instance where I accidentally destroyed the guns that were supposed to shoot at a ship. This caused the game to soft lock. Why on earth would the developers put the indestructible things here then? It makes no sense to me. They should have known something like this would happen, so I had to reload my save and go forward with the level. Thank God I had this thing on an SSD. Here's when things get interesting though. You have dialogue options here. You can choose the path of Paragon where you can talk down the Saren, which causes a boss fight to not happen, bypassing the whole thing, or you can be a complete dick and cause the boss fight to happen. Though, if you do choose the Paragon route of trying to reason with Saren, talking him down from fighting, he will just off himself anyway. So there's no real reason to have this dialogue option in the first place. I guess from a storytelling perspective it can be beneficial, but it just feels cheaper than what was expected. I don't know any other way to explain it. I mean, this whole conversation had to do with how Saren is already indoctrinated, but that he can still stop what is happening. So I guess the reason he'd off himself was because it was Sovereign's will, knowing that Saren was turning good again. This doesn't stop the onslaught of Sovereign though. So we have two options. We either let the council die to save human troops, then attack Sovereign afterwards, or we send in human troops now to save the council and take down Sovereign, but at the cost of more lost lives, specifically humans. I chose to save the council because I have a feeling in the long run it will pay off, especially since we will need to rely on the cooperation of all races to take down the Reapers once they return. Though surprisingly, Garrus wanted us to let the council die. I understand he was always against them, but I feel this was even too far for Garrus. I thought he would be for unity, whatever I suppose. After, because we're smart, we check up on the body of Saren to see if he is truly dead. Turns out he isn't. Instead, he turns into this weird hybrid of Geth and Turian. He mentioned earlier that he let Saren make modifications to him, and I'm betting that these are the modifications. So this boss fight ensues that feels nothing like a boss fight. It was incredibly easy once I upgraded my Shepard and his weapons all the way. And if you just focus on Saren instead of the Geth that attack you, the fighting will end. You don't have to take out the rest. Low-key, I kind of like this. I think it's irritating to have to take out every single enemy in the area even after defeating the boss. But once you take him out, Sovereign will shut down for whatever reason, and this causes an opening which results in the Alliance going in for the kill. Well, it was Joker who took the final shot and defeated Saren. There is a reason I haven't mentioned Joker much in this video. He just isn't that important. He becomes a deeper character in the sequels. But in classic fashion, when Sovereign falls, it of course falls on the crew. Garrus and Liara both seem alive with Shepard nowhere to be seen. And Anderson's like, oh no, Shepard. Nah, bitch, he's still alive and kicking, motherfucker. Let's be honest here though, it was cringe. I laughed hard when Shepard was sprinting over to Garrus and Liara. I have no idea why it was so funny to me. But after this though, we talked to the council and they thanked us for saving their asses. With that, they formally accept humans into the ranks of the council, and we are the ones to pick the candidate. We can either choose Udina or Anderson. Screw Udina. Anderson's the way to go. And when you choose Anderson, Udina throws a huge fit and it's so ridiculous. Ain't no way Udina expected us to choose him. Then Shep gives a little talk about how the Reapers are yet to come. But the council doesn't listen. Shep walks away stoic like, and I have to admit, the shit was kind of cringe. but this brings an end to the first Mass Effect game. So in conclusion, I enjoyed my time with Mass Effect. I had great story moments, some memorable characters, and moments where I just burst out laughing, which I haven't done in some time genuinely. It was a great setup for a universe and a great start for a series yet to come, but there are some major flaws here. Some of the writing was questionable, dialogue choices seemed the same no matter which one you picked, Paragon and Renegade options should have had more impact than they had, the Mako section sucked, and about a half of the squad members just weren't up to par. I think the biggest thing they could have done was focus more on character development and make the game longer, rather than focus 60% of your attention on the plot. Let's be honest here, Bioware plots are interesting, sure, but they are never the highlight of their games. The characters are. Even Mark Dara said this. Later they recognized this, and that is why you see most of Mass Effect 2 be loyalty quests, and the game became the best in the series for it. To put things in simple terms, Mass Effect was great, but heavily flawed. Flawed to the point where if other games had these issues, they would be considered bad. But because of Mass Effect's extreme upsides, it makes up for it. This game is one that I will come back to every year because it has a certain charm to it that no other game has for me besides the Halo series. So with everything out of the way, let's go over the rankings. Last is not even close. This is when the game's buggy, clunky, has poor plot, and it seems like they didn't even try. This is when the devs need to go in a totally new direction. Next is it has potential. This is when the game has very good upsides, but the downsides are more abundant. Maybe a refined sequel would do the trick, or maybe some DLC. Second best is amazing. This is when the game is amazing, but because one or two big downsides, it can't be in the masterpiece category. Finally, masterpiece. This is when the game is very good, extremely polished, has a great story, and fires on all cylinders. A game worthy of the Hall of Fame. So, what is Mass Effect 1? It has potential. Like I said previously, this game is good, but there is a lot of downsides here. I can't in good faith put this game any higher. For one, the rest of the trilogy is just a lot better and more refined writing and gameplay wise, not to mention they are longer. This game was just too short for me. They could have put a lot more here if they wanted to. The right way to put this is, this game set a good foundation for what is to come. But by no way, shape, or form is it the best of the trilogy. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. I just graduated college and I have a job, so it's kind of hard to juggle everything at once. Also, this script was the hardest I've had to write in any of the videos I made. I have no idea why. Maybe I was just having brain fog. It happens every now and again. The game I will probably make next will either be Red Dead Redemption or The Last of Us Left Behind and do an analysis on that. I just got an Xbox, so my choice of games has opened up. So put your recommendations down in the comments. Thanks guys. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'm gonna see you guys soon. Peace out.